Now at 10, an arrest in connection to that shooting between motorcycle gangs at a gas station. This all happened as thousands of people are in Volusia County to celebrate Bike Week.
They roared into Britain on thundering Harleys, leather-clad warriors fighting for control of the streets. The Hells Angels and Outlaws MC, two legendary biker gangs locked in a deadly rivalry that would explode in shocking violence. What started as territorial disputes soon escalated into ambushes, shootings, and murder. Behind their iconic patches lies a hidden world of loyalty, revenge, and bloodshed that rocked the UK to its core. The untold story of Britain's most dangerous biker war.
In August last year, Jerry Tobin spent a weekend at the Bulldog Bash, an annual event in Warwickshire organised by the Hells Angels. He was heading home at the front of a 3-vehicle convoy, in keeping with his status as a senior or fully patched Hells Angel. The biker was followed onto the M40. As he reached speeds of between 80 and 90 miles per hour, a car drew up close and 2 shots were fired. Mr. Tobin was killed instantly. Today, 2 men from a rival biker group, the Outlaws, were found guilty of his murder.
Murder of Jerry Tobin. The summer of 2007 turned deadly on a stretch of British highway when Jerry Tobin, a 35-year-old mechanic and devoted Hells Angel, was riding home from the Bulldog Bash Festival. As his Harley thundered down the M40 motorway in Warwickshire, a car pulled alongside him. Without warning, shots rang out. A single bullet struck Tobin in the back of his head, killing him instantly. His bike veered off the road as his fellow riders watched in horror. The attack wasn't random. It was a calculated hit by members of the Outlaws MC, who had been tracking Hells Angels members leaving the festival. Police later discovered the killers had set up a shooting range on private property to practice their aim. They'd planned everything meticulously, except their getaway. The burned-out car they used was quickly linked back to them. The afternoon sun beat down on the M40 motorway as Jerry Tobin's Harley-Davidson thundered along the asphalt. It was August 12, 2007, and the 35-year-old mechanic was heading home from the Bulldog Bash, one of Britain's biggest biker festivals. With his trademark bandana and leather vest bearing the infamous Death's Head patch of the Hells Angels, Tobin was easy to spot, exactly as his killers intended. Unknown to Tobin, members of the rival Outlaws Motorcycle Club had been watching festival exits, hunting for a full-patch Hells Angel. They'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, even setting up a makeshift shooting range on private property to practice their aim. As Tobin cruised at around 90 miles per hour, a Green Rover 620 pulled alongside him. The passenger window lowered and shots rang out across the highway. A single bullet struck Tobin in the back of his head, killing him instantly. His motorcycle veered off the road as his girlfriend, following in a car behind, watched in horror. The Rover sped away, leaving Tobin's body on the roadside and dozens of shocked motorists calling emergency services. Britain had just witnessed its first motorcycle club assassination on the open highway, a style of killing more common in America than the UK. This wasn't a random act of violence or road rage. Police quickly determined that Tobin had been targeted specifically because of the patch on his back. The location was no accident either. The Bulldog Bash took place in Warwickshire, an area the Outlaws considered their territory. The festival, organised by the Hells Angels, had been a source of tension for years. By killing Tobin on a public highway in broad daylight, the Outlaws weren't just murdering one man, they were sending a message that they controlled these roads. The public nature of the killing shocked the nation. Motorcycle clubs had always had a rough reputation, but executing someone on one of Britain's busiest highways showed a level of brazenness that crossed a line. The murder made front-page news across the country, with headlines warning of American-style biker wars coming to British shores. Warwickshire Police launched Operation Polar, one of the largest investigations in the force's history. Within days, they found the burned-out Rover used in the shooting, and within weeks, they began making arrests. 7 members of the Outlaws were eventually taken into custody, their phones and movements placing them at the scene. The trial revealed the chilling detail that went into the murder. The shooters had practiced for weeks. They had conducted surveillance of the festival site. They had chosen their ambush point carefully for maximum effectiveness and easy escape. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a coldly calculated hit, ordered by the leadership of the South Warwickshire chapter of the Outlaws. In 2008, all 7 men were convicted of Tobin's murder and received life sentences with minimum terms between 25 and 30 years. The judge made it clear this wasn't just punishment for killing one man, but for bringing extreme gang violence to public highways where innocent people could have been hurt or killed.
They were Simon Turner, who claimed he was at a workshop in Coventry at the time of the killing, and Dane Garside, who had admitted driving the car from which the shots were fired. Another man, Sean Crichton, pleaded guilty to murder before the trial began. The jury is still considering its verdicts on 4 other men, who all deny any involvement in what the prosecution called a military-style execution. The judge has now given the jury the option of majority verdicts, where at least 10 of them have to agree.
Gerry Tobin's murder marked a turning point for British biker culture. What had once been seen as a subculture of rebellious but ultimately harmless motorcycle enthusiasts was now revealed as something far darker: organised crime groups willing to kill in broad daylight on busy public roads. 7 Outlaws members were eventually arrested for what the media called an execution on the motorway. The murder shocked the public, not just for its brazenness, but because it happened in broad daylight on one of Britain's busiest roads. It wasn't some back-alley biker brawl. This was an assassination carried out with military precision, bringing America's notorious biker wars to British soil. The killing of Gerry Tobin marked a turning point. What had been a simmering rivalry suddenly became a full-blown war, with the Outlaws making a bold statement about their growing presence across mass incarcerations.
With cuffs in hand, a judge officially charged the president of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, John Petrarca, with felony arson charges. That's after 2 separate fires in the middle of the night at a detached home garage off Tunk Hill Road.
Mass incarcerations. The murder of Gerry Tobin triggered one of the largest crackdowns on outlaw motorcycle gangs in British history. Operation Ran, the police investigation into the killing, wasn't just about catching Tobin's murderers. It became a full-scale assault on biker gang infrastructure. When the dust settled, all 7 Outlaws members involved in the hit were behind bars, facing minimum sentences of 25 to 30 years each. But the police didn't stop there. Armed with new intelligence from wiretaps, informants, and surveillance, they swept through clubhouses across the country. Dozens of members from both clubs found themselves in handcuffs, charged with everything from drug trafficking to illegal weapons possession. The cells filled quickly. What many bikers didn't realize was that British authorities were watching them long before Tobin's murder. Police had built detailed files on key members, mapping out networks and criminal enterprises. When they finally moved, they didn't just arrest individuals, they dismantled entire chapter leadership structures. The deadly shooting of Gerry Tobin on the M40 motorway wasn't just a murder, it was the trigger for the largest crackdown on outlaw motorcycle clubs in British history. What followed was a wave of arrests, trials, and lengthy prison sentences that emptied clubhouses across the country and put an entire generation of biker leadership behind bars. Operation Harvest was the codename for the nationwide response to the escalating biker war. Police forces from every corner of Britain joined forces, sharing intelligence and coordinating raids with military precision. Dawn raids became a regular occurrence, with armed officers smashing through the reinforced doors of clubhouses and members' homes. The message was clear. The days of bikers operating with impunity were over. The 7 Outlaws members directly involved in Tobin's murder were just the beginning. As police dug deeper, they uncovered evidence of widespread criminal networks. Phones seized during the initial arrests provided contact lists that led to more suspects. Informants, sensing which way the wind was blowing, came forward with information in exchange for reduced sentences or protection. Each arrest led to more intelligence, creating a domino effect that toppled biker operations across the country. Unlike previous crackdowns that had focused on street-level crimes, this operation targeted the organizations themselves. Prosecutors used new laws designed for fighting organized crime, allowing them to charge club officers for crimes committed by their members. Chapter presidents who had carefully kept their hands clean for years suddenly found themselves facing decades in prison for directing criminal enterprises. The numbers were staggering. In the 3 years following Tobin's murder, over 200 full-patch members of various clubs were sent to prison, with sentences averaging 12 years. Entire chapters of both the Outlaws and Hells Angels effectively ceased to exist, with every patch-wearing member either behind bars or in hiding. Clubhouses that had stood as symbols of biker power for decades were seized under proceeds of crime laws, their contents auctioned off, and buildings sold or converted to other uses.
Said initially this morning that we had arrested 192. I am correcting that number. It is a little bit lower. At last count, we have 170 individuals that we have arrested and are booking or have been booked into the McLennan County Jail. Those individuals are being charged with engaging in organized crime in reference to the shooting at Twin Peaks.
The mass incarcerations created a power vacuum in the biker world. With experienced leaders locked away, younger, often more volatile members stepped up to fill their positions. Many lacked the restraint and strategic thinking of their predecessors, leading to impulsive actions that further exposed their operations to law enforcement. Some chapters descended into internal power struggles, further weakening clubs already reeling from the loss of their core membership. Prison life brought its own challenges for the bikers. Behind bars, the fearsome reputation that protected them on the streets meant little. They faced enemies from rival clubs, gang members with grudges, and prison populations who didn't follow the biker code of honor. Many were forced to request protective custody, a humiliating step for men who had built their identity on toughness and self-reliance. The mass incarcerations transformed Britain's biker landscape almost overnight. Clubs that had dominated territories for decades suddenly disappeared from the streets. The rumbling processions of Harleys that had once announced their presence became rare sights. In their place came a new generation of bikers, more careful, more hidden, and all too aware of the heavy price their predecessors had paid for their visibility. The mass incarcerations created power vacuums in both organizations. Suddenly, experienced leaders were gone, replaced by younger, often more volatile members. The old guard who understood the unwritten rules of the biker world were now writing letters from prison cells instead of calling the shots on the streets. These empty slots in the hierarchy led to chaotic power struggles within the clubs themselves, even as they faced increased scrutiny from authorities who were now treating them not just as troublesome bikers, but as organized crime groups deserving of Maurice Mom Boucher.
It's a time that, looking back, is almost hard to believe. This was Maurice Mom Boucher at a court appearance for his son. Boucher was the head of an elite chapter of the Hells Angels. Everyone knew Mom Boucher was a killer, and he knew everyone knew. He seemed to love it. Quebec's biker war raged for 8 years. More than 160 people were killed, and it made the man at the middle of it infamous.
Maurice Mom Boucher. Maurice Mom Boucher cast a long shadow over the biker world without ever setting foot in Britain. From his base in Montreal, Canada, this legendary Hells Angels president rewrote the rulebook for outlaw motorcycle clubs worldwide, turning traditional biker gangs into sophisticated criminal empires. Standing just under 6 feet tall with piercing eyes and a permanent scowl, Boucher didn't look like someone who'd earned the nickname Mom. The name came from Maurice, but it took on new meaning as he became a father figure to countless bikers who followed his vision. Despite his unassuming appearance, those who crossed him rarely lived to regret it. Boucher's rise to power began in the rough streets of Montreal in the 1980s. After a stint in prison for sexual assault, he joined the Hells Angels at a critical time when Canadian biker gangs were battling for control of the lucrative drug trade. While others relied on brute force alone, Boucher brought strategic thinking to the conflict. He organized the Angels into a military-style operation with clear chains of command, dedicated roles, and unprecedented discipline. Under his leadership, the Quebec Biker War erupted, a bloody conflict that claimed over 160 lives between 1994 and 2002. Boucher didn't just target rival gang members, he ordered hits on their families, friends, and anyone who supported them. The violence reached shocking levels when his men began bombing public establishments connected to rival gangs, killing innocent bystanders in the process. What set Boucher apart from other biker leaders was his business mind. He created a multi-layered organization where full-patch members rarely got their hands dirty. Instead, he established puppet clubs of younger bikers who handled dangerous street-level tasks while the main chapter reaped the profits. He opened legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction companies, tattoo parlors that laundered drug money while providing jobs for loyal members. Perhaps his most lasting innovation was the creation of the Nomads chapter, an elite force within the Hells Angels that answered directly to him. These were his most trusted men, freed from the territorial restrictions of normal chapters and able to move wherever they were needed to enforce his will or expand club territory. Boucher's downfall came in 2002 when he was sentenced to life in prison for ordering the murders of 2 prison guards, a brazen attack meant to show that even behind bars, no one was beyond his reach. Yet even from his cell, his influence continued. The organizational structure he created spread to Hells Angels chapters across Europe, Australia, and throughout North America. The summer sun beat down on the M40 motorway as Jerry Tobin rode his Harley-Davidson home from the Bulldog Bash, one of Britain's biggest biker festivals. It was August 12, 2007, and the 35-year-old mechanic was in high spirits after spending the weekend with his Hells Angels brothers. With his girlfriend following in a car behind, Tobin had no idea he was riding into an ambush that would send shockwaves through Britain's biker world. As his motorcycle thundered along the highway in Warwickshire at around 2 p.m., a Green Rover 620 pulled alongside him. In an instant, shots rang out. A single bullet struck Tobin in the back of his head, killing him instantly. His beloved Harley veered off the road as his girlfriend watched in horror, powerless to help as her partner's life ended in seconds on the asphalt. This wasn't a random act of violence or road rage. Police quickly determined that Tobin had been targeted specifically because of the patch on his back, the infamous Death's Head logo of the Hells Angels. The shooters were members of the rival Outlaws MC, who had carefully planned the assassination for maximum impact. For weeks before the murder, Outlaws members had been watching the routes bikers took to and from the Bulldog Bash Festival, which was held at the Long Marston Airfield near Stratford-upon-Avon. They set up a shooting range on private property to practice their aim. They chose their spot on the motorway carefully, a stretch with good visibility and easy escape routes. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a coldly calculated hit. The brutality and public nature of the killing shocked even hardened police officers. Executing a man in broad daylight on one of Britain's busiest highways showed a level of brazenness rarely seen in UK crime. It wasn't just the murder of one man. It was a declaration of war, a message to the Hells Angels that nowhere was safe, not even on the open road that bikers consider sacred territory. The police response was swift and massive. Operation Polar, as it was called, became one of the largest investigations in Warwickshire police history. Within weeks, they tracked down the burned-out Rover used in the shooting and began piecing together the conspiracy that led to Tobin's death. 7 members of the Outlaws were eventually arrested. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Cell phone records placing them at the scene, forensic evidence linking them to the murder weapons, and perhaps most damning testimony from one of their own who broke the biker code of silence. In 2008, all 7 men were convicted of Tobin's murder. The sentences were harsh, life imprisonment with minimum terms between 25 and 30 years. The judge made it clear this wasn't just punishment for killing one man, but for the breathtaking disregard for public safety their actions showed. Jerry Tobin's murder marked a turning point in Britain's biker culture. What had been a simmering rivalry erupted into open warfare, bringing American-style biker violence to British soil in a way that couldn't be ignored. His death stripped away the romantic image of outlaw bikers, revealing the darker reality of organized crime that lurked beneath the surface of motorcycle club culture.
Well, he won the first round. The jury in Boucher's original trial found him not guilty. The laughing wouldn't last. A second trial was ordered on appeal. One of the reasons, jurors had been intimidated. Boucher was found guilty the second time around. He would spend the rest of his days in prison, but still plugged into organized crime. In fact, still ordering murders. In 2018, he had another 10 years tacked on to a life sentence. Now, the reason Boucher became what some have called a folk hero in Quebec is because most of the victims of the biker war were criminals, but not all. For journalists who covered those years, there are names of innocent victims that are impossible to forget. The prison guards who were killed, Diane Lavigne and Pierre Rondeau, Daniel Desrochers, the 11-year-old boy playing in a park, killed when a Jeep nearby was blown up. And Yves Albert, the father of two, gunned down gassing up his car. He was shot 9 times because he was mistaken for a biker. If, for a time, Boucher lived a life that seemed to be above the law, it didn't last. He spent his final 2 decades locked up. What did last is the pain he caused.
Though locked away until his death from throat cancer in 2022, Mom Boucher's legacy lives on in outlaw motorcycle clubs worldwide. His blueprint for transforming bikers from rebellious road warriors into organized crime powerhouses forever changed the face of motorcycle club culture and created a model that law enforcement agencies are still struggling to combat today. The days of proudly and openly displaying club patches began to fade as the legal noose tightened and the essence of what it meant to be Outlaws UK chapters. Outlaws UK chapters. The Outlaws MC planted their flag in British soil years after the Hells Angels had already established themselves as the dominant biker force. Starting with just a handful of chapters in the Midlands region, the Outlaws expanded rapidly through the 1990s and 2000s. Their recruitment strategy was simple but effective: target existing local motorcycle clubs and convince them to patch over to become Outlaws chapters. Each new chapter meant more territory, more manpower, and more influence. Soon, the distinctive skull and crossed pistons patch of the Outlaws was appearing in cities across England: Birmingham, Leicester, London, and beyond. They weren't just hanging out in clubhouses either. The Outlaws ran bars, organized events, and built a network that rivaled the Hells Angels' long-established presence. What made the UK chapters unique was their fierce independence. While they paid respect to the American mother chapter, British Outlaws developed their own identity, adapting American biker culture to British streets. They claimed territories around motorway corridors, creating invisible boundaries that other clubs crossed at their peril. The distinctive skull and crossed pistons patch of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club first appeared on British roads in the late 1980s, years after their bitter rivals, the Hells Angels, had already established a foothold. What began as a small presence in the Midlands would grow into one of the country's most powerful biker organisations, with chapters stretching from Scotland to the south coast. Unlike the Hells Angels, who expanded through carefully controlled official charters, the Outlaws built their UK presence through a strategy of absorbing existing motorcycle clubs. They would approach established local clubs with strong membership but limited power, offering them the protection and prestige of the International Outlaws name. This patch-over process instantly transformed small independent groups into cells of a worldwide organisation. The first major Outlaws stronghold emerged in the West Midlands, centred around Birmingham and Coventry. These industrial cities, with their working-class traditions and strong motorcycle culture, proved fertile ground for recruitment. The Outlaws deliberately established their power base in regions where the Hells Angels' presence was weak, creating territories they could defend more easily. Each Outlaws chapter follows a military-style structure with elected officers. The president runs the chapter, supported by a vice president, sergeant-at-arms, enforcer, secretary, and treasurer. This leadership team makes day-to-day decisions, though major moves require votes from all full members. Prospective members might spend years proving themselves before receiving the coveted full patch. The clubhouses themselves vary from converted industrial buildings to ordinary-looking houses in residential areas. From the outside, many appear unremarkable, identified only by discreet security cameras and the occasional row of motorcycles parked outside. Inside, they transform into private worlds where normal society's rules don't apply. Most feature bars, meeting areas, and heavily secured rooms where club business happens, away from prying eyes. Becoming a recognized chapter isn't easy. Groups must first prove themselves as support clubs, wearing patches that show allegiance to the Outlaws without full membership rights. Only after demonstrating loyalty, recruiting strength, and often generating income for the larger organization will they be granted full chapter status and the right to wear the official Outlaws patch. By the early 2000s, the UK Outlaws had grown powerful enough to directly challenge Hells Angels territories. They established chapters near traditional Angels strongholds in London, Essex, and Kent, creating a powder keg of tension that would eventually explode into violence. The strategic placement of these chapters wasn't accidental. They deliberately encroached on lucrative drug trafficking routes and entertainment venues controlled by their rivals. The chapter system creates a network that's remarkably resilient against law enforcement efforts. When police target one chapter, members from others provide support, money, and manpower to keep operations running. This built-in redundancy means taking down individual chapters rarely impacts the organization as a whole. Today, the UK Outlaws continue to expand, with new chapters emerging in previously untapped areas. Each new patch on the map represents not just a group of motorcycle enthusiasts, but another outpost in a sophisticated criminal network that has successfully transplanted American biker culture into British soil, often with bloody consequences. The Warwickshire chapter became particularly notorious, establishing their power base dangerously close to areas the Hells Angels considered their turf. This expansion didn't happen by accident. It was a deliberate strategy to challenge the Hells Angels' dominance, pushing boundaries until something had to break. Their growing presence and bold territorial claims led directly to increasing tensions and, eventually, mass arrests that would decimate their ranks. Now talk about Walter Stadnik. Walter Stadnik didn't look like your typical biker boss. Standing just 5 feet 5 inches with a slight build, he earned the nickname Nugget, short for Nugget, but what he lacked in size, he made up for in ruthless ambition. As the first Canadian national president of the Hells Angels, Stadnik transformed scattered biker gangs across Canada into a unified criminal empire that stretched from coast to coast. Born in Hamilton, Ontario, Stadnik's journey into the biker world began with local clubs before he patched over to the Hells Angels in the early 1980s. Unlike the flashy gangsters who flaunted their wealth, Stadnik lived modestly, driving ordinary cars and living in middle-class neighborhoods. This low-key approach kept him off police radar while he quietly built his power base. Walter Stadnik doesn't fit the Hollywood image of a feared biker boss. Standing just 5 feet 5 inches with a slight build that earned him the nickname Nugget, short for Nugget, he looks more like an ordinary guy you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Yet this unassuming figure transformed the Hells Angels from scattered clubs into Canada's most powerful criminal organization, with influence reaching across oceans to shape biker gangs in Britain and beyond. Born in Hamilton, Ontario, Stadnik's journey into biker royalty began in the 1970s with local motorcycle clubs before he patched over to the Hells Angels. Unlike the flashy gangsters who flaunt their wealth, Stadnik lived remarkably modestly. He drove regular cars instead of flashy vehicles, lived in middle-class neighborhoods, and avoided the spotlight. This low-key approach kept him off police radar while he quietly built his power base across the country. What made Stadnik dangerous wasn't physical intimidation, but his business mind. He saw beyond traditional biker activities like bar fights and wild parties. recognizing untapped potential in organized drug trafficking, loan sharking, and extortion. Under his leadership, the Hells Angels established sophisticated networks that generated millions while keeping most members at arm's length from the actual drugs. This structure made prosecution nearly impossible, as the real bosses were several layers removed from street-level crimes. Stadnik's greatest achievement was orchestrating the massive expansion of the Hells Angels across Canada during the 1990s. He approached rival clubs with a simple choice: join us or be destroyed. Many chose to patch over, surrendering their club colors to become Hells Angels chapters. Those who refused faced bombings, shootouts, and assassinations in what became known as the Quebec Biker War, a conflict that claimed over 160 lives between 1994 and 2002. Despite the bloodshed happening under his watch, Stadnik maintained a remarkable ability to avoid direct links to violence. While his soldiers carried out murders and bombings, he remained insulated, using careful communication methods and tight-knit circles of trusted associates. This approach kept him free, while many other leaders faced prison time. His influence extended far beyond Canada. Stadnik established connections with Hells Angels chapters in Europe and particularly the UK, where British bikers studied his organizational methods. His blueprint for expansion, combining strategic violence with business thinking, became the template for how modern motorcycle clubs grow their territory and influence around the world. Stadnik's downfall finally came in 2004 when he was sentenced to 20 years for drug trafficking. Yet even behind bars, his legacy continued as the criminal empire he built flourished under new leadership. The sophisticated structure he created proved almost impossible to dismantle, with new members stepping up whenever police removed key figures. Today, the organizational model that Stadnik perfected continues to frustrate law enforcement worldwide. His greatest achievement wasn't just building a criminal empire, it was creating a self-sustaining system that could survive without him, ensuring the Hells Angels would remain powerful long after his name faded from headlines. What made Stadnik particularly dangerous was his business mind. He saw beyond the traditional biker activities of bar fights and bike runs, recognizing the untapped potential in organized drug trafficking, loan sharking, and extortion. Under his leadership, the Hells Angels established sophisticated distribution networks that generated millions while keeping most members at arm's length from the actual drugs. Stadnik's greatest achievement was the strategic expansion of the Hells Angels across Canada during the 1990s. He approached rival clubs with a simple choice: join us or be destroyed. Many chose to patch over, surrendering their club colors for the Death's Head logo. Those who refused faced bombings, shootouts, and targeted assassinations in what became known as the Quebec Biker War, a conflict that claimed over 160 lives and wounded countless others. Despite the bloodshed happening under his watch, Stadnik maintained a remarkable ability to avoid direct links to violence. While his soldiers carried out murders and bombings, he remained insulated, using encrypted communications and tight-knit circles of trusted associates. This careful approach kept him free while other leaders faced prison time. Stadnik's influence spread beyond Canada. He established connections with chapters across Europe and particularly in the UK, where British bikers studied and adopted his organizational methods. His blueprint for expansion, combining strategic violence with business acumen, became the template for how modern outlaw motorcycle clubs grow their territory and influence. The empire Stadnik built eventually attracted serious attention from law enforcement, setting the stage for ambitious young leaders like Vidal Rashad Reed to rise through the ranks with new approaches to the old biker code. Vidal Rashad Reed. Vidal Rashad Reed wasn't born into the spotlight. Growing up in North Carolina's patchwork landscape of rural communities and growing cities, the young man who would eventually face murder charges started out like many others. Those who knew Reed in his earlier years described someone with natural charisma and street smarts that helped him navigate the complex social networks of Raleigh's East Side. By his early 20s, Reed had developed a reputation as someone who could move between different social circles with ease. Unlike the older generation of bikers who lived and breathed motorcycle culture from their teen years, Reed came to the scene later, drawn not just by the bikes, but by the connections and opportunities they represented. North Carolina has long been home to both legitimate motorcycle enthusiasts and clubs with darker reputations. The state's extensive highways and rural backroads make it perfect for riding, while its position along major East Coast trafficking routes has historically attracted organized groups with interests beyond just motorcycles. Reed, now 29, found his niche somewhere in this gray area. He wasn't your stereotypical biker. He was younger, more adaptable, and understood how the game was changing. While traditional clubs operated on old-school principles of loyalty and territory, Reed recognized that modern criminal enterprises needed to evolve. As law enforcement cracked down on obvious criminal activity, Reed reportedly helped modernize operations within his circle. He wasn't the loudest or most visibly dangerous. Those who knew him say he preferred to stay just under the radar, making connections and solving problems rather than creating them. The world Reed operated in was changing fast. The old image of motorcycle clubs, exclusively white, middle-aged men on American-made bikes, had given way to a more diverse reality. Younger members like Reed represented a new generation that blended traditional biker culture with street life and modern business sense. In Raleigh's evolving urban landscape, different groups often crossed paths, sometimes peacefully and sometimes not. Reed understood the power of alliances in these spaces. He wasn't the biggest or most intimidating figure, but associates describe someone who knew how to talk, when to listen, and when to make strategic moves. Whatever path Reed had been on took a dramatic turn on January 1st, 2025. What appeared at first to be a tragic motorcycle accident on Bayberry Lane in Raleigh would later be revealed as something far more sinister. Jonas Barrett Padilla, 37, was thrown from his motorcycle and later died from his injuries. Within days, police had reclassified the incident as a homicide. The investigation moved quickly. By the time police announced arrests, they had 5 suspects in custody, Reed among them, alongside Anthony Cheever, Tyler Grissom, Martinus Starks, and David Stevens. The charges were serious: murder, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and conspiracy to commit robbery with a dangerous weapon. Law enforcement hasn't publicly revealed all details about what happened that evening, but court documents suggest a planned attack rather than a random act of violence. The fact that authorities separated some defendants during court appearances to prevent them from communicating and further conspiring hints at concerns about the group's coordination. People familiar with North Carolina's biker world weren't entirely surprised by the violence. Tensions between different clubs have simmered beneath the surface for years, occasionally boiling over into public view. While police haven't officially confirmed gang connections, local sources suggest Padilla had ties to one motorcycle group, while some of the arrested men were affiliated with rivals. These club rivalries aren't just about motorcycles, they're about territory, respect, and business interests. In the modern era, these conflicts can involve everything from drug distribution to legitimate businesses used for money laundering. Whatever the specific trigger, the result was the same: a man dead, a family shattered, and 5 suspects facing potential death penalty charges. When Reed appeared in court, the extra security presence spoke volumes about how authorities viewed the case and its defendants. 5 additional deputies stood watch, an unusual step that signaled the seriousness of both the charges and the perceived risk. For Reed, the promising street operator who had navigated Raleigh's complex social landscape, the future now holds only 2 possibilities: life behind bars or the death penalty. Chief Estella Patterson's words hung in the air: dangerous criminals who terrorize and harm our communities with callous and relentless violence. As the case moves forward, the full story of what happened that New Year's Day, and Reed's exact role in it, remains to be determined in court. But for now, the rapid fall from street operator to murder suspect marks the latest chapter in a life that took the wrong turns. Martinus Jermaine Starks. At 41, Martinus Jermaine Starks was the oldest among the 5 men charged in the murder of Jonas Barrett Padilla. On the streets of Raleigh, they called him the Hammer, not just for his imposing 6 feet 2 inches frame and powerful build, but for how he handled problems. In the world of North Carolina's motorcycle clubs, Starks had built a reputation as someone who didn't say much, but whose presence alone could settle disputes. Unlike his younger co-defendants, Starks represented the old guard of biker culture. He wasn't interested in new technology or modern methods. He believed in the traditional ways. People who knew him described a man who lived by a strict code, loyalty to his brothers, respect for the old ways, and swift consequences for anyone who crossed the line. Starks didn't start out in the biker world. His journey began in the military, where he served for nearly a decade before receiving an other-than-honorable discharge following a series of disciplinary issues. Those who served with him remembered a soldier with natural leadership abilities and tactical skills, but also someone with a dangerous temper when pushed too far. After leaving the service, Starks struggled to find his place in civilian life. The structured environment of motorcycle clubs provided something he'd been missing: brotherhood, purpose, and clear rules. By his mid-30s, he had established himself in Raleigh's biker community as someone who handled security and enforced discipline within his circle. What made him particularly effective wasn't just his size or strength, it was his calculated approach. Unlike younger hotheads who rushed into conflicts, Starks planned carefully. He understood intimidation was often more effective than actual violence. In North Carolina's competitive motorcycle club scene, this reputation made him both respected and feared. The tension between traditional biker culture and newer approaches played out within Raleigh's motorcycle clubs. Investigators believe this clash of old and new may have contributed to the violent confrontation that claimed Padilla's life on New Year's Day. Jonas Barrett Padilla, the 37-year-old victim, reportedly had connections to the Pagans Motorcycle Club. Meanwhile, Starks and his co-defendants, including 29-year-old Vidal Reed, represented a different faction. For years, these groups had maintained an uneasy coexistence in North Carolina, but something changed in late 2024. Law enforcement sources suggest that territorial disputes had been brewing for months. While younger members like Reed might have favored modern approaches to these conflicts, Starks reportedly pushed for more direct action. His old-school mentality, that respect had to be earned through strength and fear, clashed with newer members' preference for less visible methods of control. What exactly happened on January 1, 2025, remains partially shrouded in investigative secrecy. What's known is that at approximately 7:10 p.m., police responded to what appeared to be a motorcycle accident on Bayberry Lane. They found Padilla thrown from his bike with serious injuries that would later prove fatal. By January 4th, investigators had determined this was no accident. Evidence suggested Padilla had been deliberately targeted in what police now classify as a robbery and murder. Within days, 5 arrests followed, including Starks, who police believe played a significant role in planning and executing the attack. Court documents hint that the confrontation may have been carefully orchestrated. Prosecutors allege that Stark's military background proved valuable in coordinating the group's movements that evening. The heightened security during court proceedings, with 5 extra deputies present, speaks to how seriously authorities view these defendants and the potential for ongoing conflicts. What separates Starks from typical criminals is his adherence to what insiders call the code. In traditional motorcycle club culture, this unwritten set of rules governs everything from loyalty to handling conflicts. Those familiar with Starks say he lived by these principles with almost religious devotion. This code likely explains the extra security measures taken during court appearances. Authorities separated some defendants to prevent them from communicating and further conspiring, suggesting concerns about their continued coordination even behind bars. For someone like Starks, cooperation with authorities would be unthinkable. The brotherhood comes first. As Starks now faces the possibility of life imprisonment or even the death penalty, his story represents the darker side of motorcycle club culture that continues to exist despite law enforcement crackdowns. For decades, territorial disputes and codes of honor have fueled cycles of violence across America's biker world. Raleigh Police Chief Estella Patterson's statement about removing dangerous criminals who terrorize and harm our communities with callous and relentless violence speaks directly to the threat authorities believe men like Starks pose to public safety. For the family of Jonas Barrett Padilla, particularly his wife and son, the old codes and club rivalries provided no comfort, only heartbreak. As one friend put it, Padilla wasn't just a news story, he was my best friend. The collision between old-school biker mentality and an innocent life has left permanent scars on a community, with Martinus Jermaine Starks now facing judgment for his role in a tragedy that never should have happened. Tyler Scott Grissom. At just 29 years old, Tyler Scott Grissom wasn't what most people picture when they think of dangerous criminals. Friends described him as smart, calculated, and always thinking 3 steps ahead. Unlike some of his co-defendants in the murder of Jonas Barrett Padilla, Grissom wasn't primarily known for physical intimidation. His power came from his mind, his ability to plan, organize, and stay cool under pressure. Growing up in North Carolina's Triangle region, Grissom had a knack for moving between different social circles. He could blend in anywhere, from high-end motorcycle dealerships to rough biker bars. This chameleon-like quality made him particularly valuable in Raleigh's motorcycle club scene, where he reportedly served as something of a strategist for his group. What made Grissom different from stereotypical biker gang members was his carefully crafted public image. While many of his associates embraced the outlaw appearance, Grissom maintained a more mainstream look that helped him navigate both the biker world and legitimate society. By day, people who knew him said he worked at a motorcycle shop where customers found him knowledgeable and professional. His mechanical skills were genuinely impressive, and he could discuss the intricacies of custom bikes with enthusiasm that didn't seem fake. This legitimate connection to the motorcycle world provided both cover for other activities and genuine passion. Several acquaintances expressed shock when his name appeared in connection with Padilla's murder. The Grissom they knew seemed too calculated to get involved in something so brazen. But investigators believe this public persona masked a much darker side, one willing to participate in planned violence when it served his group's interests. Law enforcement sources familiar with motorcycle clubs in North Carolina suggest Grissom played a financial role within his circle, while older members like 41-year-old Martinus Starks may have handled enforcement, and younger members like Vidal Reed brought street connections. Grissom reportedly managed resources and planned operations. This organizational role might explain why authorities took special precautions during court proceedings. When Grissom made his first appearance before a judge, he was separated from some co-defendants. Court officials cited security risks and concerns about defendants further conspiring as reasons for keeping them apart. These unusual steps suggest investigators view Grissom as someone with significant influence over the group. People familiar with motorcycle club operations note that financially minded members like Grissom are often more dangerous than the obvious tough guys. Their ability to manage money, plan complex operations, and maintain connections across different worlds makes them particularly valuable to criminal organizations, and especially concerning to law enforcement. As pieces of the investigation have become public, Grissom's alleged role in Jonas Padilla's death appears consistent with his reputation as a planner. The killing wasn't a random act of violence, but what prosecutors describe as a coordinated attack disguised as a motorcycle accident. On January 1, 2025 at 7:10 p.m., what initially appeared to be a tragic motorcycle crash on Bayberry Lane turned out to be something much more sinister. Padilla, thrown from his motorcycle with serious injuries, later died at the hospital. By January 4th, investigators had reclassified the case as a homicide. Court documents suggest the 5 defendants, Grissom, Starks, Reed, Cheever, and Stevens, planned the attack as a robbery that turned deadly. The heightened security presence during court appearances, 5 extra deputies in the courtroom, speaks to how seriously authorities view these suspects and their potential danger. While officials haven't publicly confirmed all details, sources familiar with North Carolina's motorcycle club scene suggest the killing stemmed from ongoing tensions between rival groups. Padilla reportedly had connections to one club, while Grissom and his co-defendants were affiliated with another. These motorcycle club conflicts often revolve around territory, respect, and business interests. Grissom's alleged participation highlights how even members who maintain more respectable appearances can become involved in the worst aspects of club violence when rivalries escalate. For Grissom, the consequences couldn't be higher. Along with his co-defendants, he faces charges of murder, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and conspiracy to commit robbery with a dangerous weapon, charges that could potentially bring the death penalty or life imprisonment. The case has devastated Padilla's family. His wife and son now face life without him, and his mother-in-law described the murder as a heartbreaking tragedy. A friend emphasized that Padilla wasn't just a news story, he was my best friend. As the case moves toward trial, the full depth of Grissom's involvement will likely become clearer. But whatever role he played in the events of New Year's Day, the clean-cut strategist now finds himself facing the same potential fate as his more visibly dangerous associates: a lifetime behind bars or possibly death row for a crime that shattered a family and shocked a community. Anthony Edward Cheever. Anthony Edward Cheever seemed like the last person anyone would expect to face murder charges. At 33, the oldest except for Martinus Starks among the 5 defendants, Cheever had built a reputation in Raleigh as someone who understood both sides of the law. With his neat appearance, articulate speech, and seeming respect for authority, many who knew him were shocked when his name appeared in connection with the death of Jonas Barrett Padilla. Unlike his co-defendants, Cheever hadn't grown up in the biker world. His path to involvement with motorcycle clubs came through a more unexpected route: former military and security work that eventually connected him with groups operating in the shadows of North Carolina's motorcycle community. The irony of Cheever's situation wasn't lost on those who knew his history. After serving 4 years in the military, Cheever had worked in private security and even briefly considered a career in law enforcement. Former colleagues described someone who understood police tactics, security systems, and the legal system from the inside. This background made him particularly valuable to motorcycle clubs with criminal connections. While most members attracted police attention with obvious displays of outlaw culture, Cheever knew how to blend in. He could spot undercover officers, recognize surveillance operations, and advise on avoiding legal pitfalls. These skills earned him respect in circles where such knowledge was highly valued. People familiar with motorcycle clubs in North Carolina suggested Cheever played an advisory role rather than being a full patch-wearing member. His knowledge of law enforcement techniques reportedly helped certain groups stay one step ahead of police. Until the events of New Year's Day 2025 changed everything. By late 2024, Cheever had established himself as something of a security consultant within Raleigh's biker underground. Sources close to the investigation believe he used his knowledge of police tactics to help plan various criminal activities, ensuring they remained difficult to detect or prosecute. This expertise allegedly extended to the planning of what would become a fatal confrontation with Jonas Padilla. Investigators suspect Cheever advised on how to make a murder appear like an accident, knowledge that could only come from someone familiar with how police investigate suspicious deaths. The tragedy unfolded on January 1, 2025, when what initially appeared to be a motorcycle accident on Bayberry Lane turned out to be something far more sinister. Padilla was thrown from his bike and suffered fatal injuries. Police quickly determined the accident had been staged, and by January 4th, they had reclassified the case as a homicide. What makes Cheever's case particularly disturbing to law enforcement is how he allegedly used inside knowledge against the very system he once respected. Prosecutors believe his understanding of police methods helped the group plan their crime and initially disguise its true nature. This betrayal of his former principles might explain the heightened security during court appearances. When the 5 defendants faced a judge, extra deputies stood watch, an unusual step that signaled how seriously authorities viewed these men and the potential ongoing threat they represented. For investigators, Cheever represents a particularly troubling type of criminal, someone who understands the system well enough to exploit its weaknesses. His alleged role in the murder plot showed how knowledge meant to protect communities could be twisted to serve darker purposes. Court documents suggest the killing stemmed from ongoing tensions between rival motorcycle groups in the Raleigh area. Padilla reportedly had connections to one club, while Cheever and his co-defendants were linked to another. These club rivalries, once limited to bar fights and territory disputes, had escalated to deadly violence. Cheever's position between the legitimate security world and outlaw biker culture allegedly made him useful in this conflict. He could move between different social circles, gathering information and planning operations without attracting the same attention as more obvious club members. For Chiva, the consequences of his alleged actions couldn't be more severe. Along with Vidal Reed, Tyler Grissom, Martinus Starks, and David Stevens, he faces charges that could bring the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. Raleigh Police Chief Estella Patterson's words about removing dangerous criminals who terrorize and harm our communities now apply to a man who once might have stood on the side of law and order. His fall from potential protector to alleged murderer represents one of the most disturbing aspects of this tragic case. As the legal process moves forward, the full extent of Chiva's involvement will likely become clearer. But the damage already done can't be undone. A family mourns a husband and father, and a community grapples with violence that shattered the peace of a New Year's evening in Raleigh. David William Stevens.
He's also been charged with the first-degree murder of Jonas Padilla. In that case, you could receive the death penalty or life in prison.
The other two suspects, 24-year-old David Stevens and 29-year-old Tyler Grissom, appeared in court this morning. Investigators tell us the separate hearings are to prevent the men from conspiring or communicating in any way.
At just 24 years old, David William Stevens was the youngest of the 5 men charged in Jonas Barrett Padilla's murder. While his older co-defendants brought established connections and years of experience to their alleged crime, Stevens represented something different: youth, impressionability, and a desperate desire to prove himself in a world where respect often came through violence. Friends who knew Stevens described someone caught between worlds, not fully embraced by the motorcycle club scene, but eager to earn his place. Unlike the older defendants with established reputations, Stevens was still trying to make his mark, making him potentially more unpredictable and dangerous. Growing up in Raleigh's outskirts, Stevens had bounced between different social groups throughout his teens and early 20s. Former classmates remembered him as someone always on the edges, watching the popular kids and tough crowds with equal measures of resentment and admiration. His connection to motorcycle culture began through basic mechanics. With natural talent for engines but limited formal education, Stevens found work at local bike shops, where his technical skills earned respect that eluded him in other parts of life. This entry point eventually connected him with more established figures in Raleigh's motorcycle community. By late 2024, Stevens had reportedly begun spending time with older, more established members like Martinus Starks and Anthony Chiva. Sources familiar with local motorcycle clubs suggest he was in a prospect phase, not yet fully accepted, but eager to prove his loyalty and worth. When the plan to target Jonas Padilla came together, investigators believe Stevens' eagerness to prove himself made him a willing participant. The youngest and least established member of the group had the most to gain by demonstrating his commitment through whatever action was required. The attack on January 1st, that initially appeared to be a motorcycle accident, revealed itself as something far more sinister. Padilla was thrown from his motorcycle on Bayberry Lane and later died from his injuries. Within days, police had determined it was murder, and 5 arrests followed, including Stevens. What made Stevens particularly concerning to authorities became evident during court proceedings. When he and Tyler Grissom appeared before a judge separately from the other 3 defendants, investigators cited a possible security risk and concerns about further conspiracy as reasons for the separation. This unusual step suggests investigators viewed Stevens as unpredictable, perhaps more willing to take desperate actions or more vulnerable to influence from others. As the youngest defendant with potentially the most to prove, his behavior presented unique challenges for court security. For Stevens, the consequences of his alleged quest for belonging couldn't be more severe. Along with his co-defendants, he faces murder charges that could bring life imprisonment or the death penalty, a devastatingly high price for whatever acceptance he sought from his older associates. Raleigh Police Chief Estella Patterson's statement about removing dangerous criminals from the streets now applies to a young man whose full story is still unfolding. As the youngest defendant, Stevens represents a particular tragedy, someone whose search for identity and respect allegedly led him down a path ending in murder charges before his 25th birthday. While Padilla's family mourns their devastating loss, a husband and father gone forever, 5 men, including Stevens, await their next court date. facing the ultimate consequences for what police describe as a planned attack that brought needless death to Raleigh's streets on the first day of 2025.
A rare look inside the secret world of the KKK. For those of you who think burning crosses and hooded rallies are relics of the civil rights era, think again.
Beneath the roar of motorcycle engines and the glare of chrome, a hidden story was taking shape, one that would shock America. The rise of the Ku Klux Klan bikers is not just about outlaws on the open road, but about how an infamous hate group found a new way to survive. Discover how old prejudices swapped white robes for leather vests and went underground, rewriting their playbook. This is a tale of reinvention, danger, and the surprising power of transformation. The Founder. The story of the Ku Klux Klan bikers begins with a man whose hate ran deeper than any tattoo could show. Dennis Michael McGiffin wasn't born into extremism, but somewhere along the backroads of the American Midwest, he found his way to it. As a young man drifting through life without purpose, the structure and sense of belonging offered by the Ku Klux Klan pulled him in like a rip current. By his mid-30s, McGiffin had climbed the ranks to become a grand dragon in the KKK, commanding respect and fear in equal measure. But as the 1990s approached, McGiffin grew frustrated with what he saw as the old-fashioned, ineffective methods of the traditional Klan. The midnight meetings, the burning crosses, the white robes, all of it seemed like theater to him, not revolution. While older Klan members clung to tradition, McGiffin hungered for action. This hunger led McGiffin to break away from the KKK, taking with him a group of like-minded younger members. Together they formed a new organization called the New Order, inspired by a violent white supremacist group from the 1980s and the fictional race war depicted in The Turner Diaries, a novel that had become a blueprint for white nationalist terrorism. McGiffin's vision wasn't about preserving some imagined past. It was about forcing a violent future. The New Order wasn't interested in parades or public rallies. They stockpiled weapons, studied explosives, and plotted attacks on water supplies, federal buildings, and civil rights organizations. They saw themselves as soldiers in a coming race war, not just advocates for white power. McGiffin believed that through violence and terror, they could trigger the collapse of the government and create a white ethnostate from the ashes. Their plotting came to an abrupt end in February 1998, when coordinated FBI raids hit McGiffin and his associates across several states. Authorities discovered illegal weapons, explosives, and detailed plans for attacks that could have killed thousands. The evidence was overwhelming, and McGiffin was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for weapons charges. Though prosecutors had pushed for terrorism enhancements, prison didn't reform McGiffin, it refined him. Behind bars, he made connections with other white supremacists and studied organizational tactics. Most importantly, he observed how prison gangs and motorcycle club members operated, noting the respect they commanded and the loyalty they inspired. In the prison yard, patches and colors meant more than words, and brotherhood was sealed in blood and ink. McGiffin noticed something else during his time inside: society's complicated relationship with outlaw bikers. While feared, they were also romanticized in American culture. A Klansman in robes raised immediate alarm, but a leather-clad biker could move through society with less scrutiny, despite potentially harboring the same hateful beliefs. When McGiffin was released on parole in 2004, he emerged with a new vision. For years, he quietly rebuilt connections in the white supremacist community, attending motorcycle rallies when permitted and planning his next organization. Finally, in 2010, when his parole ended, Dennis McGiffin was ready to launch his new creation, the Ku Klux Klan Bikers, officially known as the Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club. Unlike traditional motorcycle clubs focused primarily on riding and brotherhood, the Ku Klux Klan Bikers was conceived from the start as a vehicle for white supremacy. McGiffin combined the trappings of outlaw biker culture, the leather vests, the rigid hierarchy, the intimidating imagery, with the racist ideology of his Klan days. The result was something both old and new, a hate group disguised as a motorcycle club. McGiffin carefully crafted the club's image and symbology. Their patches featured coded white supremacist imagery that would be recognizable to those in the know, but might pass as edgy biker aesthetics to outsiders. The club colors of black and silver were chosen not just for their intimidating look, but as a nod to the SS Bolt symbol popular in neo-Nazi circles, while maintaining the traditional Klan color scheme of black and white. Unlike his previous venture that had landed him in prison, this time McGiffin focused on staying just within legal boundaries, at least on paper. The motorcycles weren't just for show, they were central to the new strategy of mobile, visible intimidation that could expand across state lines and into new territories where traditional Klan groups had failed to gain footholds. As the engines of the first official Ku Klux Klan bikers roared to life in 2010, McGiffin had successfully reinvented himself and his cause. Gone was the Klan robe, replaced by leather cuts and motorcycle boots. But beneath the new exterior beat the same hateful heart, now with a more effective vehicle to carry its poison into the mainstream of American life. With this foundation established, McGiffin was ready to build his Klan bikers into a force that would soon rise to prominence in the landscape of American extremism. Their rise to prominence. The Ku Klux Klan bikers didn't roar onto the national scene overnight. Their growth was methodical, deliberate, and surprisingly strategic for an organization built around such a destructive ideology. McGiffin had learned from his previous mistakes. This time, he wouldn't rush into violence that would bring down swift law enforcement attention. Instead, he focused on building a sustainable organization that could spread the Klan's message while maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. In the early days, the Ku Klux Klan bikers established chapters in small, economically depressed towns across the Midwest. These communities, often predominantly white and struggling with job losses and opioid crises, provided fertile recruitment grounds. Local men, feeling left behind by economic changes and hungry for identity and brotherhood, were prime targets for McGiffin's message that blamed their troubles on minorities, immigrants, and a government that supposedly favored everyone but them. The club's recruitment process was carefully structured to gradually reveal its true nature. New prospects would first encounter the Ku Klux Klan bikers at seemingly innocent motorcycle events, charity rides, or local bars. These initial contacts focused on the brotherhood and freedom of the biker lifestyle, with little mention of race or politics. Only after establishing personal connections would members begin introducing white supremacist ideas, typically framed as protecting white heritage or defending against replacement. Classic Klan rhetoric dressed in new language. This gradual radicalization worked effectively. By the time prospects fully understood the group's connection to Klan ideology, they were already emotionally invested in their relationships with members and the identity the club offered them. The process created true believers rather than casual racists, men who would remain dedicated even in the face of public backlash or legal troubles. The Ku Klux Klan bikers crafted a public image that walked a careful line. Their events often included mainstream elements like fundraisers for local children's hospitals or toy drives, creating community goodwill and making it harder for critics to paint them as simply a hate group. Meanwhile, their closed meetings and private gatherings featured much more explicit racism, including study sessions on white nationalist literature and discussions of racial holy war. Concepts pulled directly from traditional Klan ideology. By 2011, the club had established a presence in 5 states, with a core membership of around 200 full-patched riders and many more prospects and supporters. Their visibility increased as they conducted coordinated motorcycle runs through diverse neighborhoods, an intimidation tactic disguised as a normal club activity. Local law enforcement agencies began noting increased reports of racially motivated incidents in areas where the Ku Klux Klan bikers had established chapters. What made the Ku Klux Klan bikers particularly effective was their ability to operate in plain sight. Traditional Klan groups had become easily identifiable and socially isolated, but motorcycle culture's existing association with rebellion and outlaw behavior provided cover for the Ku Klux Klan bikers' extremism. A group of intimidating bikers rolling through town might raise eyebrows, but wouldn't immediately trigger the same response as a Klan rally or cross-burning. The club also developed sophisticated propaganda techniques that went far beyond the crude leaflets of the traditional Klan. They produced recruitment videos that interspersed patriotic imagery with coded racist messaging. Their social media presence carefully avoided explicit hate speech that might get them banned, while still signaling their true beliefs to potential recruits. They mastered the art of the dog whistle, messages that would pass as innocent to the uninformed but carry clear meaning to those familiar with white supremacist ideology. McGiffin himself became something of a celebrity in white nationalist circles. His criminal record, rather than being hidden, was presented as evidence of his dedication to the cause. A political prisoner who had suffered for his beliefs, rather than a convicted felon who had plotted terrorist attacks. This narrative helped attract the more militant elements of the white power movement, who saw in McGiffin a leader willing to take action, not just talk like the old-school Klan leaders they had grown disillusioned with. As the club grew, it began developing specialized subgroups. Some members focused on recruitment, others on security, and others on what they euphemistically called direct action, typically meaning harassment or violence against minorities. This structure allowed the organization to maintain plausible deniability when individual members committed hate crimes. Leaders could claim these were rogue actions, while privately encouraging the very behavior they publicly disavowed, a tactic that improved on both traditional Klan and outlaw biker approaches. By 2012, the Ku Klux Klan bikers had gained enough prominence that they began attracting serious attention from larger, more established white supremacist organizations. The group had achieved something remarkable. They had created a new model for extremism that blended seamlessly into American culture, replacing the obvious symbols of the Klan with the romanticized imagery of outlaw bikers, while maintaining the same hateful ideology. One organization in particular took notice: the Aryan Nations. Once among the most powerful neo-Nazi groups in America, the Aryan Nations had fallen on hard times following the death of its founder, Richard Butler, in 2004. Various factions claimed to be the true heirs to Butler's legacy, with a Louisiana-based group led by Morris Gullett emerging as one of the more organized contenders. Gullett saw in the Ku Klux Klan bikers an opportunity to revitalize his struggling organization, and McGiffin saw in the Aryan Nations name a chance to gain additional legitimacy in the white power movement. As summer approached in 2012, representatives from both organizations began meeting to discuss a formal alliance that would reshape the landscape of organized hate in America. The motorcycle engines of the Ku Klux Klan bikers were about to carry them into a new phase of their journey, one that would bring them greater prominence but also plant the seeds of internal conflict that would eventually tear them apart. Sadistic MC joins Aryan Nations MC. The summer of 2012 marked a significant turning point for the Ku Klux Klan bikers. After months of secret meetings and negotiations, McGiffin and Morris Gullett announced a formal merger of their organizations. The new entity would be known as the Aryan Nations Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, combining the historical weight of one of America's most notorious neo-Nazi groups with the modern recruitment model of McGiffin's Klan-inspired biker organization. The announcement came at a private gathering in rural Louisiana, attended by members of both groups. The mood was celebratory, with white power flags and Nazi symbols displayed alongside motorcycle club patches. For many in attendance, this merger represented the future of the white nationalist movement, a blending of the Klan's history, Aryan Nations ideology, and outlaw biker aesthetics that could breathe new life into their struggling cause. On paper, the merger made perfect strategic sense. The Aryan Nations brought historical significance and name recognition in white supremacist circles. Founded in the 1970s by Richard Butler, the organization had once operated a 20-acre compound in Idaho that served as the epicenter of American neo-Nazism until losing it in a 2000 lawsuit. Even in its diminished state, the Aryan Nations name carried weight and legitimacy that McGiffin coveted for his Klan bikers. For Gullett's faction, which had been struggling to establish itself as the true successor to Butler's legacy, the Ku Klux Klan bikers offered fresh blood and a successful recruitment model. The aging Aryan Nations membership needed an influx of younger members, and McGiffin's motorcycle club had proven effective at attracting men in their 20s and 30s, a demographic traditional hate groups like the Klan and Aryan Nations struggled to reach. Following the merger announcement, the newly formed Aryan Nation Sadistic Souls MC embarked on an aggressive expansion campaign. Chapters sprouted up across the South and Midwest, often in areas where neither group had previously maintained a strong presence. Their events became increasingly public, with motorcycle runs serving as recruitment opportunities and displays of strength. The merger brought immediate benefits. Membership numbers swelled as the Aryan Nation's name attracted traditional neo-Nazis, while the motorcycle club structure appealed to those who might have been hesitant to join a more conventional hate group like the traditional Klan. Their propaganda materials circulated widely in extremist forums online, and their public events drew larger crowds. They established connections with white supremacist prison gangs, creating pipelines for recruitment of released inmates looking for community and purpose. Law enforcement agencies across multiple states began dedicating increased resources to monitoring the group. Unlike McGiffen's previous organization that had been caught planning specific terrorist attacks, the Aryan Nation Sadistic Souls MC was more sophisticated in maintaining distance between leadership and criminal activity. Individual members might commit hate crimes or engage in illegal activities with tacit approval, but without direct orders that could be traced back to organizational leadership. Despite these initial successes, internal tensions quickly emerged within the merged organization. McGiffen and Gullett, both accustomed to absolute authority within their respective groups, frequently clashed over direction and tactics. Their leadership styles could not have been more different. McGiffen favored flashy public displays and media attention, reflecting his Klan background where intimidation was a public spectacle, while Gullett preferred a more secretive approach focused on ideological purity and preparing for what he called the inevitable race war. Cultural differences between the two groups further exacerbated these tensions. The original Ku Klux Klan bikers, with their biker backgrounds, often found the more regimented structure of Aryan Nation stifling. They valued the freedom of the road and the brotherhood of riding together. Meanwhile, many Aryan Nation's members looked down on the bikers as undisciplined and lacking proper ideological grounding, more interested in the trappings of outlaw culture than in serious white nationalism. These tensions began to manifest publicly within months of the merger. At events, observers noted the way members from the two original groups clustered separately, rarely mingling despite supposedly being part of the same organization. Chapter meetings became contentious as arguments broke out over everything from membership requirements to public messaging strategy. By early 2013, the rift between the McGiffen and Gullett factions had grown too wide to ignore. At an event in Alabama, what should have been a display of unity instead revealed an organization on the verge of fracturing. The two leaders barely acknowledged each other, and their respective inner circles remained separated throughout the gathering. The internal power struggle intensified as both men sought to assert control. McGiffen, with his charismatic presence and growing media profile, began to overshadow Gullett in public perception. Meanwhile, Gullett used his deeper connections in the white supremacist movement to undermine McGiffen's authority within the organization, questioning his ideological commitment and spreading rumors about his personal life and Klan background. As 2013 progressed, members were increasingly forced to declare loyalty to either McGiffen or Gullett. Chapter meetings became battlegrounds for competing visions of the organization's future. Some chapters split entirely, with half remaining loyal to the Aryan Nation's tradition and half embracing the motorcycle club culture championed by McGiffen's Klan bikers. What had started with such promise was clearly failing. The merger that was supposed to strengthen both groups was instead tearing them apart. The dream of unified white supremacist power was crumbling under the weight of ego conflicts and organizational differences. As fall turned to winter in 2013, the stage was set for a dramatic and public breakup that would reshape the landscape of hate groups in America once again. The breakup. The end came suddenly, but the signs had been building for months. In late 2013, Morris Gullett published a scathing attack on Dennis McGiffen and the Ku Klux Klan bikers on social media. The carefully crafted facade of unity shattered as Gullett publicly labeled McGiffen and his followers as drunks and race mixers, who made a mockery of everything the Aryan Nation stood for. He attached photos of Sadistic Souls members at parties, middle fingers raised to the camera, behavior he deemed unbecoming of Aryan warriors. McGiffin wasted no time in responding with his own blistering counterattack, questioning Gulet's leadership abilities and his claim to be the legitimate heir to Richard Butler's Aryan nation's throne. The online war of words quickly spread throughout white supremacist social media, with supporters on both sides joining the fray. The Aryan nation's sadistic soul's MC was effectively dead, less than 2 years after its formation. In the aftermath of the public split, both leaders scrambled to control the narrative. Gulet claimed he had expelled the Ku Klux Klan bikers for behavior that violated core Aryan nation's principles, while McGiffin insisted that he had voluntarily withdrawn his club from what he characterized as Gulet's ineffective leadership. Both men portrayed themselves as the defenders of true white nationalist values and painted the other as having betrayed the cause. The reality behind the breakup was more complex than either man admitted publicly. Their partnership had always been a marriage of convenience, rather than a true ideological union. McGiffin's approach to white nationalism, filtered through Klan history and biker culture, emphasized visible intimidation and territorial presence. Gulet's old-school neo-Nazi methodology focused on ideological purity and preparing for a future race war. These fundamentally different approaches created a philosophical divide that proved impossible to bridge. The split had immediate practical consequences for both organizations. Chapters with divided loyalties sometimes fractured, with neither faction retaining enough members to maintain a viable presence. Financial resources became points of contention, with accusations of theft and misappropriation flying in both directions. Some members, disillusioned by the infighting, dropped out of the movement entirely, while others hopped between splinter groups looking for stability. Law enforcement agencies monitored the meltdown with keen interest. The public airing of dirty laundry provided valuable intelligence, and informants reported that the stress of the organizational chaos led to increased substance abuse among members. Some local chapters, lacking clear direction from national leadership, became more erratic and prone to violence, creating additional opportunities for criminal charges and infiltration. For McGiffin, the split represented a significant setback. The Aryan nation's name had given his Ku Klux Klan bikers additional legitimacy in white supremacist circles. Without it, the sadistic souls risked being perceived as just another racist biker gang, rather than a serious ideological force in the white nationalist movement. His personal reputation had also taken a hit, with Gulet's accusations raising questions about his commitment to the cause. In an effort to reassert his relevance, McGiffin began reaching out to other white supremacist organizations. He positioned the Ku Klux Klan bikers as victims of Gulet's betrayal and emphasized their continued dedication to white nationalism. These overtures found receptive audiences among groups that had their own grievances against Gulet's leadership claims or had been skeptical of the merger from the beginning. Meanwhile, Gulet worked to shore up his position as the legitimate heir to the Aryan nation's legacy. He distributed photos allegedly showing McGiffin's family members with non-white individuals, a cardinal sin in their shared ideology. He also circulated court documents suggesting McGiffin's son had fathered a child with a non-white partner, turning McGiffin's family into a weapon against him in the propaganda war between the former allies. McGiffin attempted to dismiss these allegations with technical distinctions that only further damaged his standing. His claim that his son's relationship had been with an Indian, which is no better to me, but my son was 15, and at 16 it was over, satisfied neither his supporters nor his critics. In the black and white racial worldview of white nationalism, any attempt to draw distinctions between different non-white groups was seen as evidence of ideological weakness. By mid-2014, the landscape of white supremacist organizations had been permanently altered by the failed merger and messy divorce. Both groups were weakened, their reputations damaged by the public airing of internal disputes. Yet in this fragmented environment, new opportunities for alliance and reorganization emerged. As summer approached, McGiffin began discussions with leaders of several smaller white nationalist groups who shared his dissatisfaction with the current state of the movement. These conversations would eventually lead to a new coalition, one that promised to unite various factions under a common banner while avoiding the leadership disputes that had doomed the Aryan nations' partnership. The Ku Klux Klan bikers were down, but they weren't out. McGiffin had already proven his ability to reinvent himself and his organization. As he gathered his closest allies for strategy sessions, a new vision began to take shape, a coalition that would become known as the Black and Silver Solution. Black and Silver Solution joins. From the ashes of the failed Aryan nations merger, the Ku Klux Klan bikers sought a new path forward. Rather than seeking another single organization to join forces with, McGiffin envisioned a coalition where his motorcycle club could maintain its distinct identity. By mid-2014, this vision took form as the Black and Silver Solution, with the Klan bikers serving as its centerpiece. The name Black and Silver Solution cleverly referenced both motorcycle club culture and Klan heritage. Black representing the traditional robes of Klan leadership, silver nodding to decorative elements in Klan regalia, while both colors featured prominently in biker aesthetics. This dual symbolism perfectly captured the Ku Klux Klan bikers' identity as the modern evolution of America's oldest hate group. For the Ku Klux Klan bikers, this coalition offered a chance at redemption after their failed merger with Aryan nations. It connected their relatively new motorcycle club to the broader historical tradition of white supremacism in America, lending them legitimacy they couldn't achieve alone. McGiffin positioned his Klan bikers as the dynamic, visible face of the coalition, traditional hate wrapped in leather and chrome. The structure allowed the Ku Klux Klan bikers to maintain their distinct motorcycle club culture while coordinating with traditional hate groups on recruitment, propaganda, and public actions. McGiffin's group brought something unique to the table, mobility and visibility that static organizations lacked. While traditional Klan groups operated in shadows, the Klan bikers could rumble through towns, their patches and bikes creating an intimidating presence without the immediate backlash burning crosses would trigger. The first major test came in early 2015 with a coordinated literature distribution campaign. The Ku Klux Klan bikers manufactured thousands of weighted plastic bags containing racist flyers and tossed them onto driveways across 5 states. The operation merged old and new, the traditional Klan tactic of anonymous literature drops executed by a mobile force of motorcyclists who could cover more ground than conventional members. Local news coverage provided free publicity, while the bikers' mobility allowed quick escapes from any areas where they might face confrontation. Throughout 2015, the Klan bikers expanded their activities under the coalition umbrella. Monthly motorcycle runs became recruitment showcases, with the thundering procession of bikes drawing attention in ways traditional Klan events couldn't. The Ku Klux Klan bikers' distinctive appearance, leather vests adorned with patches containing subtle Klan symbolism alongside traditional biker imagery, made them the most visible representatives of the coalition. These motorcycle events served multiple purposes. They attracted potential members drawn first to the motorcycle culture before being gradually introduced to the group's ideological underpinnings. They intimidated minority communities as the bikes roared through diverse neighborhoods, and they created brotherhood among members, strengthening bonds through shared experiences on the road. The Ku Klux Klan bikers also modernized recruitment approaches. Where the traditional Klan had relied on family connections and local networks, the motorcycle club version established a presence at biker rallies, patriot gatherings, and music events. Their aesthetic, less obviously extremist than white robes, but still coded with white supremacist symbolism, allowed them to operate in spaces where the traditional Klan would be unwelcome. However, as 2015 progressed, tensions emerged between the Ku Klux Klan bikers and other coalition members. McGiffin had made significant adaptations to traditional Klan practices to fit the motorcycle club model. Most controversially, he opened membership to white men of various religious backgrounds, not just the Christian identity adherents that traditional Klan groups demanded. This change helped recruitment, but angered purists within the coalition who saw it as diluting core Klan principles. The Ku Klux Klan bikers' biker culture also created friction with more buttoned-down coalition partners. Traditional white supremacist groups often emphasized discipline and respectability, at least outwardly, while the motorcycle club embraced a more outlaw image with the drinking, partying, and behavior typical of biker culture. Some coalition members worried this behavior undermined their attempts to present white nationalism as a legitimate political movement. By summer 2016, these ideological and cultural divisions were straining the coalition. The very adaptations that had made the Ku Klux Klan bikers successful, their blending of hate group ideology with motorcycle culture, were creating tension with traditional organizations. Once again, the attempt to bridge different extremist cultures was proving difficult, demonstrating that even shared hatred couldn't overcome fundamental differences in approach and lifestyle. The coming months would bring even greater challenges for the Ku Klux Klan bikers as personal scandals involving McGiffin threatened both their position in the coalition and the very foundations of their credibility as a white supremacist organization. Race-mixing allegations. The race-mixing allegations against Dennis McGiffin struck at the very foundation of the Ku Klux Klan bikers. What began as whispers during the Aryan Nation's breakup erupted into a full-blown scandal that threatened everything the motorcycle club stood for. For an organization that had modernized Klan ideology for the biker world while maintaining its core belief in racial separation, this crisis couldn't have been more devastating. At the center of the controversy was McGiffin's son and the mixed-race child he had fathered. For the Ku Klux Klan bikers, this represented the ultimate betrayal of their principles. Since its inception, the original Klan had positioned itself as the defender of white racial purity, and the motorcycle club version had carried this ideology forward into the biker subculture. Now, the very man who led these leather-clad Klansmen faced evidence that his own bloodline had been contaminated, according to the beliefs he preached from atop his motorcycle. The evidence mounted steadily through 2016, spreading through the Klan bikers' networks like wildfire. Former members who had left the club during previous disputes circulated court documents showing child support payments and custody arrangements. Photos of McGiffin's mixed-race grandchild appeared in the private online forums where Klan bikers communicated. Members who had pledged their loyalty to the organization began questioning how their president could claim to ride for white power, while his own son had violated the most fundamental principle of Klan ideology. The scandal created an impossible situation within the ranks of the Ku Klux Klan bikers. Members who had proudly displayed their patches, carefully designed to incorporate subtle Klan symbolism into traditional biker aesthetics, now questioned whether these symbols meant anything at all. If their leader couldn't maintain racial purity within his own family, what separated them from any other racist biker gang? The ideological foundation that distinguished the Ku Klux Klan bikers from ordinary motorcycle clubs was crumbling. McGiffin's attempts to defend himself only exacerbated the damage. When confronted by his officers, his explanation that it was an Indian, which is no better to me, but my son was 15 and at 16 it was over, satisfied no one within the organization. To hardcore members of the Klan biker group, such distinctions between different non-white backgrounds revealed weakness in their racial ideology. His claim that the relationship had been brief was directly contradicted by evidence of ongoing child support payments and visitation arrangements. As the scandal expanded, questions arose about the standards of the entire Ku Klux Klan bikers organization. Traditional Klan groups had always maintained strict membership requirements, not just for members themselves, but extending to their families. The motorcycle club version had seemed to relax these standards under McGiffin's leadership, focusing more on building numbers than maintaining ideological purity. Members began to ask what it truly meant to wear the Klan biker patches if their leadership couldn't enforce the fundamental principles they claimed to represent. Chapter presidents found themselves in difficult positions as they faced questions from their members that they couldn't answer. Some remained loyal to McGiffin, arguing that a man shouldn't be judged by his adult son's actions. Others saw the situation as proof that the organization had strayed too far from traditional Klan values in its effort to modernize. This ideological split created tension at every Klan biker gathering, with members taking sides and sometimes coming close to physical confrontations. The Ku Klux Klan bikers' reputation within the broader white supremacist movement deteriorated rapidly. The motorcycle club had positioned itself as the vanguard of modern Klan activity, bringing the ideology to younger recruits through the attractive veneer of biker culture. Now they were becoming a laughingstock, with other organizations in the Black and Silver solution questioning whether the clan bikers deserved a place at the table at all. For a group that had prided itself on bringing new energy to an old cause, this loss of standing was particularly painful. Unlike previous challenges the Ku Klux Klan bikers had faced, leadership disputes, territory conflicts, or tactical disagreements, this controversy struck directly at the heart of their identity. The contradiction between the racial purity they demanded of members and the reality of their leaders' family situation undermined the very reason for the organization's existence. It wasn't just McGiffen's leadership at stake, it was the credibility of the entire concept of modernizing Klan ideology through motorcycle culture. By mid-2016, as the Ku Klux Klan bikers prepared for the Black and Silver Solution Fall Conference in Alabama, the organization stood at a breaking point. Members who had once proudly thundered down highways, their bikes adorned with symbols combining their dual identities as bikers and Klan supporters, now questioned whether their colors still meant anything at all. The marriage of white sheets and leather jackets that McGiffen had engineered was facing its greatest test, and the rumble of discontent was growing louder than their motorcycle engines. Family or club? McGiffen faced the most painful dilemma in his journey leading the Ku Klux Klan bikers, choosing between blood ties and his ideological tribe. On one side stood his son and mixed-race grandchild, living proof that human connections often transcend even the most deeply held beliefs. On the other stood the Ku Klux Klan bikers and his position as their leader, the identity and power structure he had spent years building. This wasn't simply about reputation, it cut to the core of who Dennis McGiffen was as head of the Klan Motorcycle Club. Since his early days in the traditional KKK, he had built his entire identity around leading white supremacist organizations. The Ku Klux Klan bikers represented his life's work, his attempt to modernize the Klan's message through motorcycle culture. Walking away would mean admitting his life had been constructed on principles that even he couldn't fully maintain. Initially, McGiffen tried threading an impossible needle. In public settings and Klan biker meetings, he minimized his son's actions and his connection to his grandchild. He characterized it as a youthful mistake, something that happened when his son was a teenager. He claimed that while his son was legally obligated to pay child support, there was no ongoing relationship with either the mother or the child. Yet evidence suggested otherwise. Photos occasionally surfaced showing family gatherings where the grandchild was present. Court documents indicated ongoing visitation arrangements. These contradictions further undermined McGiffen's standing among the Ku Klux Klan bikers. If their leader couldn't fully commit to the racial purity the Klan had always demanded, why should they remain loyal to his motorcycle club version? The crisis forced many Ku Klux Klan bikers to examine their own commitments. Some stood firmly with McGiffen, arguing that a man shouldn't be judged by the actions of his adult children. Others saw his situation as proof that the motorcycle club had strayed too far from the strict racial standards that defined the traditional Klan. The divide reflected deeper questions about what the Ku Klux Klan bikers actually were: a genuine continuation of Klan ideology in biker form, or merely a racist-leaning motorcycle club with watered-down principles. As pressure mounted through summer 2016, McGiffen took increasingly desperate steps to preserve his leadership of the Ku Klux Klan bikers. He publicly disowned his son in posts on white supremacist forums, claiming he had chosen race mixing over family and was no longer welcome at club events. He doubled down on racist rhetoric in speeches to the Klan bikers chapters, perhaps compensating for the contradictions in his personal life with even more extreme positions. These efforts did little to quell the growing dissent within the Ku Klux Klan bikers. Many members saw through the performance, recognizing it as a desperate attempt to save face rather than a genuine recommitment to the principles the Klan had always stood for. Others felt that McGiffen had betrayed his own blood for the sake of his position, making him untrustworthy on a fundamental level. Neither abandoning family for the Klan nor compromising Klan principles for family earned him respect among his motorcycle brethren. By late summer 2016, the Ku Klux Klan bikers were fracturing along these lines. Some chapters remained fiercely loyal to McGiffen, while others began operating with increasing independence. Members began choosing sides, and the once unified Klan Motorcycle Club started to fragment, with some chapters returning to more traditional clan affiliations and others drifting towards standard outlaw biker culture. Just when it seemed the situation couldn't deteriorate further, McGiffin faced betrayal from within his own family circle. His half-brother, also a member of the Ku Klux Klan bikers, decided to publicly expose everything he knew about McGiffin's family situation, delivering a blow that would prove nearly impossible for the Klan biker leader to recover from. McGiffin brother betrays him. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other knife, and McGiffin felt the full edge of that blade when his half-brother turned against him and the Ku Klux Klan bikers. In a movement where loyalty to the white supremacist cause was paramount, this fraternal betrayal represented the ultimate violation. This wasn't just another member speaking out. This was someone who knew the Ku Klux Klan bikers' leader's personal life intimately and couldn't be dismissed as an outsider with an agenda. In a devastating social media post that spread like wildfire through the Ku Klux Klan bikers' networks and beyond, McGiffin's half-brother wrote, "The truth hurts, don't it, Denny? You can tell anybody you want the lies, but I'm your brother. I know the whole real truth, don't I? And you don't want everybody else finding out about what's really going on." The cryptic nature of this last line was particularly damaging to the Ku Klux Klan bikers' reputation, suggesting there were even more damaging revelations about their leader waiting to be exposed. The betrayal devastated the Ku Klux Klan bikers on multiple levels. First, it confirmed beyond dispute that their president had been dishonest about the extent of his family's race-mixing situation, a direct contradiction to the core principles the Klan had always stood for. Second, it came from within McGiffin's own bloodline, making it impossible to dismiss as just another attack from enemies of the Klan bikers. And finally, the suggestion that there were more secrets to reveal created a cloud of suspicion that hung over the entire organization. The impact on the Ku Klux Klan bikers was immediate and severe. Members who had been willing to give McGiffin the benefit of the doubt now faced irrefutable evidence from his own brother that their leader had been lying. Chapter presidents who had proudly led their local Klan biker groups found their own credibility damaged among their members. Some began distancing their chapters from national leadership, focusing instead on local activities where McGiffin's shadow didn't reach. McGiffin responded by immediately expelling his half-brother from the Ku Klux Klan bikers, citing disloyalty and violation of club rules about airing internal matters publicly. This move backfired spectacularly, as it appeared to confirm that the president of the Klan bikers was more concerned with punishing those who told the truth than addressing his own contradictions. His brother, now freed from club discipline, became even more vocal, sharing additional details about family gatherings where McGiffin had interacted with his mixed-race grandchild, actions completely counter to the racial separation the Klan had always preached. The timing couldn't have been worse for the Ku Klux Klan bikers, coming just weeks before the scheduled Black and Silver Solution Conference in Scottsboro. Coalition partners were already questioning McGiffin's leadership based on the initial allegations. His brother's confirmation transformed doubt into certainty, making the Klan bikers' position within the coalition completely untenable. Organizations that had been willing to work with the Ku Klux Klan bikers now faced pressure from their own members to cut all ties. What made the betrayal particularly devastating was that it exposed the fundamental hypocrisy at the heart of the Ku Klux Klan bikers. McGiffin had built a motorcycle club around the Klan's ideology of racial hatred while seemingly making exceptions for his own family. This contradiction undermined not just his personal authority, but the entire basis on which the Ku Klux Klan bikers operated. If their founder and president couldn't maintain the racial purity standards the Klan had always demanded, what legitimacy did their organization have? By early fall 2016, the Ku Klux Klan bikers' credibility was in tatters. Even their most loyal members struggled to defend the organization against accusations coming from their leader's own blood. The upcoming Black and Silver Solution Conference, meant to showcase unity and strength, was instead poised to become the site of another organizational collapse for the Klan bikers. Some coalition members announced they would boycott the event entirely, rather than share space with representatives of McGiffin's motorcycle club. The coalition that was meant to unify white supremacist forces was instead being torn apart, setting the stage for the next major setback in the Ku Klux Klan bikers' troubled history. Black and Silver Solution leaves. The fall 2016 conference in Scottsboro, Alabama, became the funeral for the Ku Klux Klan bikers' involvement in the Black and Silver Solution. What should have been a demonstration of unified white supremacist strength instead became a public spectacle of rejection as coalition members turned against McGiffen's Klan biker group. Several organizations boycotted entirely, while others sent representatives specifically to formally cut ties with the Ku Klux Klan bikers. The conference opened with immediate conflict centered around the Klan Motorcycle Club. Representatives from the United Klans of America, a traditional Klan organization, demanded McGiffen and his biker group be removed from all coalition leadership positions before proceedings could continue. When this demand wasn't immediately met, they walked out, followed by members of several smaller organizations. The half-empty meeting hall visually represented the isolation the Ku Klux Klan bikers now faced. Those organizations that remained engaged in heated debates about whether the Klan bikers should remain in the coalition at all. While some argued that they should focus on future action rather than McGiffen's personal matters, others countered that allowing the Ku Klux Klan bikers to remain involved would undermine the coalition's core principles and credibility. The motorcycle club that had once represented a modern evolution of Klan activity was now seen as a liability by its former allies. Throughout the increasingly contentious meeting, McGiffen attempted to defend his Ku Klux Klan bikers, insisting that his personal family situation had no bearing on the club's commitment to white supremacist principles. But his words fell on increasingly deaf ears as organization after organization announced their intention to cut ties with the motorcycle club. The Klan bikers, once seen as an innovative approach to spreading white supremacist ideology, were now being treated as pariahs. By December 2016, most organizations had formally announced they would no longer associate with the Ku Klux Klan bikers. Some former allies immediately announced the formation of new coalitions that specifically excluded McGiffen's motorcycle club. Others retreated to focus on local activities, disillusioned with the idea of cooperation with the Klan bikers after the scandal surrounding their leader. The formal dissolution came in January 2017 when the remaining coalition leadership held a conference call and voted to disband the Black and Silver Solution entirely, largely due to the controversy surrounding the Ku Klux Klan bikers. For McGiffen's Motorcycle Club, this represented another catastrophic failure in their efforts to gain legitimacy within the broader white supremacist movement. The Aryan Nations merger had collapsed due to leadership conflicts, and now the Black and Silver Solution had fallen apart because of McGiffen's personal contradictions. The Ku Klux Klan bikers were severely damaged by their expulsion from the coalition. Membership numbers, which had been bolstered by the perceived legitimacy of the Black and Silver Solution, began to decline sharply. Some entire chapters disbanded as members turned in their patches and left for other organizations or abandoned the movement entirely. Those that remained were the hardest core supporters, loyal to the concept of a motorcycle club version of the Klan, despite the embarrassment of recent events. By spring 2017, the Ku Klux Klan bikers faced a stark reality. The club was a shadow of its former self, isolated from the broader white supremacist movement and losing members rapidly. Their attempt to modernize the Klan through motorcycle culture had momentarily succeeded before collapsing under the weight of their leader's personal contradictions. For many observers, this might have seemed like the end of the experiment in bringing Klan ideology to biker culture. But if the history of both the Klan and outlaw motorcycle clubs proved anything, it was their remarkable ability to adapt and resurface after apparent defeats. Back to the drawing board, faced with the collapse of their position in the Black and Silver Solution and the erosion of their membership, the Ku Klux Klan bikers returned to what they did best: adaptation and reinvention. The motorcycle club underwent a complete restructuring after the mass exodus that followed McGiffen's race-mixing scandal. Despite everything, the Klan bikers weren't starting from zero. A core of intensely loyal members had stuck with the organization through the controversy, believing in either McGiffen or his vision enough to weather the storm. The Ku Klux Klan bikers' approach this time was both a return to basics and a strategic pivot. Rather than seeking to build another coalition or merge with another established group, they focused on rebuilding their motorcycle club from the ground up with a refined identity. The first step was to clarify the club's values and membership requirements in ways that addressed the contradictions that had been exposed during the recent scandal. The most significant change came in the Ku Klux Klan bikers' stance toward religion. Where the traditional Klan had required adherence to Christian identity or similar ideologies, McGiffin declared that the Klan bikers would welcome white members regardless of religious beliefs. This move away from religious requirements was controversial but strategic, allowing the club to recruit from a wider pool of potential members who might share their racial views without subscribing to specific religious doctrines. The whites-only rule remained firmly in place, maintaining the core principle that had defined the Klan throughout its history. But the Ku Klux Klan bikers implemented more rigorous vetting procedures. New prospects now needed sponsorship from existing members who would vouch for their character and ideological commitment. The path to full membership became longer and more demanding, with multiple levels of initiation designed to test loyalty before receiving full patches. These changes aimed to create a more tightly knit brotherhood that could withstand external pressures and avoid future scandals. Perhaps most significantly, the Ku Klux Klan bikers shifted their focus from national alliances to international expansion. Recognizing that their reputation might be irreparably damaged within American white supremacist circles, they began establishing connections with like-minded groups in Europe and Australia. Some existing members with international backgrounds became ambassadors, traveling to establish new chapters or forge relationships with existing racist biker groups abroad. This international focus proved surprisingly successful for the Klan bikers. In countries where American white supremacist politics were less well known, McGiffin's scandals carried less weight. New chapters formed in Australia, parts of Europe, and even South Africa, often adapting the Ku Klux Klan bikers model to local conditions while maintaining core white supremacist beliefs. The club that had begun as an attempt to modernize the American Klan was transforming into a global network. Technology became a crucial tool in this reinvention. The Ku Klux Klan bikers embraced encrypted communication platforms, creating secure channels for members and sympathizers scattered across continents. While maintaining a minimal public social media presence to avoid platform bans, they developed sophisticated private networks for sharing propaganda, coordinating activities, and recruiting new members. These digital spaces allowed the club to maintain cohesion despite geographic dispersion. Visual identity remained central to the rebuilt Ku Klux Klan bikers. Their patches and insignia continued to incorporate white supremacist imagery alongside subtle references to Klan history. The black and silver color scheme remained, maintaining visual continuity with the club's origins, while adding new elements to symbolize its international reach. These colors connected them to both biker tradition and the historical black robes of Klan leadership. By 2018, the restructured Ku Klux Klan bikers were showing signs of recovery. While their numbers didn't match their peak during the black and silver solution days, their international presence gave them resilience that purely American organizations lacked. When chapters faced legal pressure or membership challenges in one country, others could continue operating relatively unaffected. This decentralization proved to be a strength, making the organization harder to track and disrupt than previous iterations. McGiffin maintained leadership of the Ku Klux Klan bikers, though he became more careful about his public image. He limited his online presence, appeared less frequently at public events, and delegated more authority to trusted chapter presidents. His personal scandals never fully faded, but as time passed and the club gained new members unfamiliar with its troubled history, their impact diminished. Recruitment methods evolved as well. Moving away from the public displays that had characterized earlier years, the Ku Klux Klan bikers adopted more subtle approaches. They targeted individuals already involved in other extremist activities, particularly in the music scene, combat sports, and traditional motorcycle culture. Online recruitment became increasingly sophisticated, with members identifying potential recruits through social media activity and gradually introducing them to more extreme content. Perhaps most importantly, the Ku Klux Klan bikers began focusing more on creating a lifestyle brand than just a motorcycle club. They produced clothing, accessories, and media that could spread their aesthetic and subtle messaging beyond formal membership. This approach allowed sympathizers to signal their alignment with the group's values without the commitment of full membership, creating a broader periphery of support around the core organization. By 2020, the Ku Klux Klan bikers had established a presence on 5 continents, with chapters operating in at least a dozen countries. While membership numbers remained modest compared to traditional motorcycle clubs, their influence extended beyond their size. The model McGiffin had created, combining Klan ideology with outlaw motorcycle culture, had proven remarkably adaptable to different cultural contexts. The story of the Ku Klux Klan bikers represents an alarming evolution in how America's oldest hate group adapts and survives in the modern era. From white robes to motorcycle leathers, from cross burnings to thundering bike runs, from local clavens to international chapters, the methods change, but the underlying hatred remains consistent. Despite repeated failures, personal scandals, and organizational collapses, the Klan found new life on 2 wheels, proving once again that hatred adapts rather than dies when faced with changing times. The Hells Angels have long stood as the ultimate symbol of outlaw motorcycle culture. From humble beginnings to international notoriety, these rebellious figures have shaped the club's fearsome reputation through their actions, leadership, and unflinching loyalty. Behind the leather jackets and death's head patches exist men whose extraordinary lives have become legendary. Criminals, influencers, leaders, and survivors who've made the Hells Angels the world's most infamous motorcycle club. Here are some individuals that are famous for their works as a Hells Angel. Number 10. Christian Ekelin. In the dark underbelly of Frankfurt, where secrets and shadows intertwine, Christian Ekelin rises to defy all expectations. Born in the bleak November of 1986, this unassuming boy from a town near Frankfurt has transformed into a remarkable figure who bridges 2 seemingly contradictory worlds: professional MMA fighter and patched Hells Angels member. Unlike many who joined the club seeking rebellion or brotherhood, Ekelin first pursued a conventional dream: becoming a professional football player. His relentless ambition earned him a contract with SV Darat 98, where he spent years toiling in the second league. But when football success proved elusive, fate steered him toward a different path. Since age 15, Ekelin had been honing his boxing skills alongside his football pursuits. A pivotal moment came during a party altercation when he defended himself against 4 attackers, leaving 3 sprawled on the ground. This display of fighting prowess caught the attention of professional MMA fighter Daniel W.L., who invited Ekelin to train in mixed martial arts. The world of MMA became Ekelin's new passion. His exceptional dedication was immediately apparent to trainers. Christian as a fighter is a very dedicated guy, one coach observed. When he comes to the gym, he is there 100% and tries to give 100% of himself. This obsession propelled him into a whirlwind professional career by age 19. While establishing himself as a fighter, Ekelin led a double life, competing in the cage by day and working as a bodyguard at a strip club owned by powerful Hells Angels member Schnitzel Walter by night. It was here that destiny intervened when he met Dominique, the boss's daughter, in an elevator incident that became the stuff of legend. Their chance encounter blossomed into romance, creating personal ties to the club that would eventually become professional. Recognizing the importance of sponsorship in the MMA world, Ekelin secured backing from Walter Burkhard, Schnitzel Walter, the influential German Hells Angel. This partnership launched Ekelin to new heights as he trained with world champions like Georges St-Pierre and developed into a formidable competitor. Success followed quickly: 6 consecutive victories, the GMC Welterweight Championship, and recognition for Knockout of the Year in 2010. Though he faced setbacks against experienced fighters in the Russian M1 Global League, Ekelin never stayed down. His 2022 rematch victory through a rear naked choke solidified his reputation as a legitimate MMA talent. What makes Ekelin truly unique in Hells Angels history is his transparency. Unlike traditional members who operate in shadows, he proudly showcases his life on social media, his training regimens, family moments, and extravagant lifestyle featuring a Lamborghini Urus, Porsche Cayenne, Ferrari 812 GTS, and Porsche 911. With over 170,000 YouTube subscribers and 44 million views, he's become an influential figure who bridges outlaw motorcycle culture and mainstream sports celebrity. Despite his intimidating fighting career, those close to Ekelin describe a different man in private, a calm, loving father who defies the aggressive stereotypes associated with both MMA fighters and Hells Angels members. His next ambition extends beyond personal success. He aims to fundamentally transform the German MMA scene while simultaneously rising through the ranks of the Hells Angels. Ekelin represents a new chapter in Hells Angels history, a member who thrives in the public eye rather than hiding from it. While his predecessor, Vladimir Stadnik, operated in shadows and used secrecy as protection, Ekelin's open approach demonstrates how the club continues evolving in the social media age, finding new ways to project power and influence without sacrificing its essential identity. Number 9. David Wolf Carroll. David Wolf Carroll rose through the ranks to become one of the most feared Hells Angels enforcers in Canada during the 1980s and 1990s. Born in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Carroll earned his fearsome reputation through unwavering loyalty and a calculated approach to violence that made him indispensable to the organization. As a member of the elite Nomad chapter in Quebec, Carroll distinguished himself through his methodical execution of club business. Unlike impulsive enforcers, Carroll was known for his patience and precision. His calculated approach made him particularly effective at eliminating problems while minimizing risk to the organization. Law enforcement sources documented Carroll's involvement in numerous murders, though the actual number is suspected to be significantly higher. Carroll's rise within the Hells Angels ecosystem began in his hometown of Dartmouth, where he established himself as a dominant figure in the local biker scene. His leadership of the Halifax-based 13th Tribe Motorcycle Club in the late 1970s demonstrated his natural authority and strategic thinking long before he joined the Angels. When the 13th Tribe became absorbed into the Hells Angels' expanding Canadian network, Carroll's exceptional abilities quickly became apparent to national leadership. What distinguished Carroll from typical enforcers was his approach to violence, cold, calculated, and completely devoid of emotion. He treated enforcement like a military operation, gathering intelligence on targets, planning contingencies, and executing with precision that left minimal evidence. This psychological discipline extended to Carroll's personal presentation. Unlike many Hells Angels who embraced flamboyant displays of wealth and power, Carroll maintained a deliberately understated appearance, driving modest vehicles and living in unremarkable homes that drew minimal attention. By the early 1990s, Carroll had been elevated to the prestigious Nomads chapter, an elite unit within the Hells Angels structure comprised of the organization's most effective and trusted members. Freed from geographic restrictions that limited regular chapters, Nomads operated throughout Canada, addressing high-priority situations and overseeing cross-regional operations. This position gave Carroll unprecedented authority, allowing him to move between territories while commanding respect even from chapter presidents. His partnership with Maurice "Mom" Boucher proved particularly consequential for the Canadian criminal landscape. While Boucher provided charismatic leadership and organizational vision, Carroll supplied the cold tactical execution necessary to implement their ambitious plans. Together, they transformed the Hells Angels from a collection of loosely affiliated chapters into a highly coordinated criminal enterprise that dominated Canada's illegal drug markets. Carroll's influence was perhaps most evident in his native Halifax, where he maintained direct oversight despite spending much of his time in Quebec. Former Halifax chapter members described how the atmosphere would transform instantly upon news of his impending visits, with frantic preparation and tension permeating the clubhouse. Carroll's criminal empire began unraveling in the late 1990s when Canadian authorities implemented unprecedented measures to combat outlaw motorcycle violence. Operation Springtime 2001, a massive coordinated investigation involving multiple law enforcement agencies. finally penetrated the layers of security Carroll had established around himself. In March 2001, as arrests were being made across Quebec and Nova Scotia, Carroll disappeared completely. His vanishing act, occurring just hours before police arrived to arrest him on multiple murder charges, demonstrated the exceptional intelligence network he had cultivated throughout his criminal career. While dozens of other Angels leaders were apprehended in the operation, Carroll somehow received advance warning and escaped, taking with him extensive knowledge of the organization's most sensitive operations and financial arrangements. Despite one of the most extensive manhunts in Canadian history, involving international cooperation through Interpol and other agencies, Carroll has never been located. Theories about his fate range from a new identity in South America to a secret burial after being eliminated by Angels leadership, concerned about what he might reveal if captured. Like Adam Lee Hall, who would later follow a similar path in the United States, Carroll represented the evolution of the Hells Angels, from disorganized rebels to sophisticated criminals. Both men understood that the club's survival depended on adapting to changing times while maintaining the core identity that made the Hells Angels legendary in the outlaw world. Number 8. Adam Lee Hall. Adam Lee Hall rose to notoriety as the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Berkshire County chapter of the Hells Angels in Massachusetts during the early 2000s. Unlike many Hells Angels who grew up in the biker culture, Hall came to the organization later in life, bringing with him a particularly calculating and cold-blooded approach to criminal activity. Born in 1977, Hall's criminal career began with auto theft and drug dealing before he caught the attention of the Hells Angels leadership. His rapid ascension through the ranks was fueled by his willingness to handle the club's most violent business without hesitation or remorse. As Sergeant-at-Arms, Hall was responsible for discipline within the chapter and protection from external threats, duties he approached with ruthless efficiency. What distinguished Hall from typical enforcers was his methodical, almost scientific approach to violence. While other Hells Angels might resort to impulsive beatings or intimidation, Hall planned his attacks with military precision. He maintained detailed information on targets' habits, routines, and weaknesses. Intelligence he would exploit when violence became necessary. This calculating approach earned him respect from senior members who valued his reliability in handling sensitive matters. Hall's childhood provided few indications of the calculated criminal he would become. Raised in Western Massachusetts in a working-class family, his early years were marked by academic struggles and behavioral issues that hinted at underlying psychological problems. Former teachers described a disturbing duality: a student capable of charm and intelligence when it suited him, yet exhibiting an unsettling emotional detachment that manifested in calculated manipulation of both peers and authority figures. Hall's entry into the Hells Angels ecosystem came through his involvement in the Massachusetts drug trade during the late 1990s. Initially working as an independent dealer with connections to several outlaw motorcycle clubs, he distinguished himself through both reliability and ruthlessness in protecting his territory. These qualities attracted attention from the Berkshire County chapter of the Hells Angels, who began utilizing his services for collections and enforcement before eventually inviting him to prospect for membership. Upon receiving his full patches and the position of Sergeant-at-Arms, Hall immediately began modernizing the chapter's operations. Under his influence, the Berkshire County Hells Angels expanded beyond traditional motorcycle club criminal activities into more sophisticated and profitable ventures. He established connections with suppliers in neighboring states to improve their drug distribution network, implemented new money laundering procedures through seemingly legitimate businesses, and developed more effective security protocols to evade law enforcement surveillance. This organizational transformation yielded immediate financial benefits for the chapter. Under Hall's guidance, profits from drug distribution increased substantially, while arrests decreased due to improved operational security. He established a sophisticated system of cutouts and intermediaries that insulated patched members from direct involvement in the most legally dangerous aspects of their business, creating layers of deniability that frustrated prosecution efforts. However, Hall's methodical approach to criminal enterprise was matched by an equally calculated approach to personal violence that eventually proved his undoing. In July 2009, he brutally assaulted David Glasser, whom he suspected of stealing one of his motorcycles. The attack, in which Hall beat Glasser with a baseball bat and forced him to sign over his truck title, demonstrated both his capacity for violence and his fundamental misunderstanding of how far his influence actually extended. When Glasser reported the assault to local police, rather than submitting to Hall's intimidation, it began an escalating series of events that would ultimately lead to multiple murders. Initially, Hall attempted to discredit Glasser as a witness by framing him for a fake armed robbery in New York State. When this elaborate scheme failed to prevent Glasser's testimony, Hall's approach took an even darker turn. In August 2011, as his trial date approached, Hall orchestrated what prosecutors would later describe as one of the most calculated and cold-blooded crimes in Massachusetts history. With the assistance of associates David Chalou and Caius Vaiovis, he abducted Glasser from his Pittsfield apartment. In a decision that reflected both tactical elimination of witnesses and a disturbing level of sadism, the group also took Glasser's roommate Edward Frampton and their friend Robert Chadwell, who were present at the time. The subsequent murders shocked even veteran law enforcement officials with their brutality. After torturing the victims, Hall and his accomplices killed all three men, dismembered their bodies with power tools, and buried the remains in a trench on private property in Beckett. This gruesome methodology exceeded what was necessary to eliminate witnesses, suggesting a level of pathological pleasure in the violence that went beyond rational criminal calculation. The investigation that followed revealed the limitations of Hall's criminal sophistication. Despite his careful planning of the abductions and murders, he made critical errors in the aftermath that quickly drew investigative attention. Within 2 weeks of the disappearances, investigators discovered the buried remains and arrested Hall along with his accomplices. The evidence recovered from the burial site, combined with extensive witness testimony and electronic records, provided prosecutors with an overwhelming case. In February 2014, after a trial that had been moved to Hampton County due to the intense publicity in Berkshire County, Hall was convicted of multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation. At his sentencing, Judge C. Jeffrey Kinder noted that in his entire judicial career, he had never encountered crimes as depraved as those committed by Hall, imposing 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Hall's legacy within Hell's Angels history represents the darkest manifestation of the club's evolution, where earlier generations of outlaw bikers operated with a certain rough code that limited extreme violence to those directly involved in criminal conflicts. Hall's willingness to target innocent bystanders and employ torture reflected a new and more disturbing chapter in outlaw motorcycle culture. Like Alan Passaro, Hall represented the darker side of the Hells Angels, the calculated violence that maintained the club's fearsome reputation. Both men became infamous for specific acts of brutality that defined their legacy within outlaw biker history, though Passaro would later be acquitted in his most notorious case, while Hall's crimes led to his permanent imprisonment. Number 7. Alan Passaro. Alan Passaro forever etched his name in both Hells Angels lore and American cultural history through his role in one of rock music's darkest moments, the 1969 Altamont Free Concert. Born in the early 1940s, Passaro joined the Hells Angels San Francisco chapter in the mid-60s, quickly establishing himself as a tough enforcer willing to handle the club's most volatile situations. Unlike other infamous Hells Angels who built reputations through years of criminal activity, Passaro's notoriety stems primarily from a single incident that unfolded before hundreds of witnesses and was captured on film. On December 6, 1969, during the Rolling Stones' performance at Altamont, Passaro fatally stabbed Meredith Hunter, an 18-year-old concert attendee who had drawn a gun near the stage. The incident occurred while the Hells Angels were providing security for the concert, an arrangement that proved disastrous as tensions escalated throughout the day. The killing was documented in the documentary film Gimme Shelter, showing Passaro repeatedly stabbing Hunter after the teenager produced a revolver. What makes Passaro's case unique is that he was acquitted of murder charges in 1971, with the jury accepting his claim of self-defense after viewing the documentary footage. The verdict remained controversial, with many questioning whether the Hells Angels should have been providing security in the first place. Passaro's early life offered few indications of the notorious figure he would become. Born into a working-class Italian-American family in the Bay Area, his childhood was unremarkable, except for an early aptitude for mechanical work and a rebellious streak that frequently brought him into conflict with authorities. Former classmates described a tough but not particularly violent teenager who found the rigid structures of 1950s America stifling and uninspiring. Like many young men of his generation seeking alternatives to conventional society, Passaro found his identity in California's emerging motorcycle culture. The freedom of the open road and the brotherhood of fellow riders provided both purpose and community that mainstream institutions had failed to offer. By the early 1960s, he had established himself in the Bay Area biker scene, known for his exceptional riding skills and mechanical knowledge, but not yet associated with the extreme violence that would later define his reputation. This psychological profile made Passaro particularly valuable during the complex social dynamics of late 1960s San Francisco. As the Hells Angels navigated relationships with the emerging counterculture, sometimes as allies, sometimes as antagonists, Passaro's ability to maintain composure in volatile situations allowed him to serve as an effective interface between these worlds. He could move comfortably between the Angels' clubhouse, Haight-Ashbury gatherings, and music venues without either abandoning the Angels' intimidating presence or creating unnecessary confrontations. This liminal position between outlaw biker culture and the hippie scene ultimately placed Passaro at the center of the defining tragedy of the era. When the Rolling Stones sought security for their free concert at Altamont Speedway in December 1969, the unusual decision to hire the Hells Angels was facilitated by the relationships the club had established with countercultural figures like the Grateful Dead. While some accounts suggest the Angels were to be paid in beer, others indicate a more formal arrangement with specific security responsibilities. What became immediately clear was that the Angels' approach to security bore no resemblance to professional concert staffing. Heavily intoxicated on beer and amphetamines, armed with weighted pool cues they called pool sticks, the bikers responded to perceived violations of stage boundaries with immediate and excessive violence. Throughout the day, tensions escalated as the Angels beat concertgoers for minor infractions, creating an atmosphere of fear and hostility that directly contradicted the peace and love ethos the event was meant to embody. By the time the Rolling Stones took the stage as the headline act, the situation had deteriorated into what one witness described as a nightmare of bad vibes and bloody violence. The crowd, numbering over 300,000 and densely packed in the natural amphitheater, pressed forward toward the low stage, while the Angels formed a human barrier that became increasingly aggressive as their territory was compressed. Meredith Hunter's fatal encounter with Passaro unfolded against this backdrop of escalating chaos. Hunter, an 18-year-old from Berkeley attending with his white girlfriend Patty Brederhoft, had already been involved in an earlier altercation with Angels who had pushed him away from the stage. Witnesses reported racial slurs directed at Hunter during this initial confrontation, raising questions about whether his race played a role in the Angels' response to his presence near the stage. When Hunter returned to the stage area during the Rolling Stones performance, the situation rapidly escalated to violence. Documentary footage captured the critical moments, Hunter drawing what appears to be a revolver, and Passaro rushing toward him with a knife, delivering multiple stab wounds before Hunter collapsed into the crowd. While some witness accounts suggest Hunter raised the gun in response to being attacked, others claim he had drawn the weapon first, creating the threat to which Passaro responded. The killing became the defining moment of Altamont, transforming what was intended as a West Coast equivalent to Woodstock into what the Rolling Stone magazine would later describe as rock and roll's all-time worst day. More broadly, many cultural historians have identified the incident as symbolic of the counterculture's loss of innocence, the moment when the idealistic vision of peace and love collided fatally with the darker realities of American society. Passaro's subsequent murder trial became a cultural spectacle in its own right. The unprecedented availability of documentary evidence, the killing had been captured by multiple cameras filming for what would become the documentary Gimme Shelter, created a unique legal situation where jurors could witness the actual events rather than relying solely on contradictory witness testimony. defense attorney Michael Leonard built his case around this footage, arguing that it clearly showed Hunter drawing a gun before Passaro initiated physical contact. This visual evidence, combined with testimony from medical examiners confirming Hunter had methamphetamine in his system at the time of his death, formed the foundation of a classic self-defense claim. After deliberating for 12.5 hours, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty, accepting that Passaro had acted to protect himself and others from an armed threat. For Passaro himself, the acquittal provided legal vindication, but did little to normalize his life. Though he attempted to maintain a low profile in the years following Altamont, his association with the killing made him a recognizable figure in the Bay Area biker community. His post-Altamont years were marked by continuing legal troubles, including arrests for various offenses throughout the 1970s. These incidents suggested a man struggling to find stability after being defined by a single moment of violence. The final chapter of Passaro's life concluded as mysteriously as his most famous moment had been public. In March 1985, his body was discovered floating in Anderson Reservoir in southern Santa Clara County with $10,000 in his pocket. Though authorities described the death as kind of suspicious, no definitive determination of foul play was ever established. Theories ranged from a drug deal gone wrong to internal Hells Angels justice. But like many aspects of outlaw biker culture, the truth remained obscured behind the club's code of silence. Passaro's legacy exists primarily as a cultural touchstone, rather than for any organizational impact on the Hells Angels themselves. His actions at Altamont became inextricably linked with the broader narrative of the 1960s collapse, the moment when the counterculture's idealistic dreams confronted the harsh realities of violence, drugs, and social division that had always existed beneath the surface of American society. Passaro's connection to Ralph "Sonny" Barger lies in how both men represented the Hells Angels in the public eye, though in vastly different contexts. While Passaro became infamous through violence that shaped the club's dangerous reputation, Barger would emerge as the face and voice of the organization, representing how the club's public image would continue evolving decades after Altamont. Number 6. Ralph "Sonny" Barger.
Can you tell me who becomes a member of a motorcycle club? What's the kind of person that the lifestyle is?
Well, it's just a guy that likes to ride a motorcycle and sort of, have a free will and kind of lifestyle. Now, there's a lot of people that ride motorcycles that don't join clubs.
Ralph "Sonny" Barger stands as perhaps the most recognizable figure in Hells Angels history, a founding member of the Oakland chapter who transformed the club from a local motorcycle gang into an international phenomenon. Born in Modesto, California in 1938, Barger's influence on outlaw biker culture can hardly be overstated. After forming the Oakland chapter in 1957, Barger quickly emerged as a natural leader with unmatched charisma and strategic vision. While often misidentified as the founder of the Hells Angels, the club was actually established in 1948. He was undoubtedly its most influential member, unifying disparate chapters under a coherent structure and having the club incorporated in 1966. What separated Barger from other outlaw bikers was his understanding of image and media. Far from avoiding publicity, Barger embraced it, giving interviews, appearing in films, and carefully crafting the Hells Angels' public persona. His charismatic presence and articulate defense of the club helped transform its members from social outcasts into countercultural icons during the turbulent 1960s. Barger grew up in hardscrabble circumstances that would have broken many children. Born to a father who worked Oakland's docks by day and drowned his troubles in waterfront bars by night, Barger experienced maternal abandonment when he was just 4 months old. His father's subsequent remarriage provided no stability when his stepmother also abandoned the family, taking even basic possessions like the family radio when she left. This childhood instability fostered both independence and a deep yearning for belonging that would later manifest in Barger's devotion to creating and maintaining the brotherhood ethos of the Hells Angels. Former schoolmates remembered a boy who rebelled against authority, not with blind rage, but with calculated defiance, consistently pushing boundaries while remaining just charming enough to avoid the harshest consequences. After a brief stint in the army, from which he received an honorable discharge after his underage enlistment was discovered, Barger returned to Oakland and purchased his first motorcycle. The freedom of the open road provided not just transportation, but identity, a means of distinguishing himself in a society that offered few paths to significance for working-class young men without formal education. What truly distinguished Barger from other outlaw bikers of his era was his sophisticated understanding of public relations and organizational development. Where many chapter presidents focused narrowly on local concerns and immediate gratification, Barger envisioned the Hells Angels as a national and eventually international organization with standardized practices, protected intellectual property, and a carefully cultivated public image. This long-term vision manifested in several critical initiatives that transformed the Hells Angels from a local curiosity into a global phenomenon. In 1966, Barger orchestrated the formal incorporation of the Hells Angels name and logo, creating legal protections for their intellectual property that would later generate significant revenue through licensing and merchandise. This move demonstrated a business acumen rare among outlaw bikers, who typically disdained such straight legal maneuvers. Barger's leadership faced its greatest test during the infamous Altamont concert in December 1969, when violence erupted and Hells Angel Alan Passaro fatally stabbed concertgoer Meredith Hunter. The incident threatened to permanently brand the club as mindless thugs rather than countercultural rebels. Barger's response demonstrated both his tactical acumen and media savvy. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Barger navigated the increasing criminalization of the Hells Angels with the same strategic intelligence that had marked his earlier leadership. As the club expanded its activities into more profitable but legally risky areas like drug trafficking and extortion, Barger maintained plausible deniability while providing guidance that balanced profit against risk. This delicate balancing act allowed the organization to thrive financially while avoiding the wholesale prosecutions that destroyed many other criminal organizations. Perhaps his greatest personal challenge came in the early 1980s, when he was diagnosed with throat cancer after decades of heavy smoking. The subsequent laryngectomy left him breathing through a valve in his neck and forced him to cover this opening to speak. This physical limitation would have destroyed the authority of a leader who relied primarily on physical intimidation. For Barger, whose leadership had always depended more on strategic intelligence and charismatic presence, it did little to diminish his standing within the organization. Barger's later decades revealed yet another dimension of his complex character as he leveraged his notorious reputation into legitimate business ventures. His best-selling 2000 autobiography, Hells Angel: The Life and Times of Sonny Barger and the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, transformed him from underground legend to mainstream author, while his subsequent books on motorcycling philosophy and culture established him as something of an elder statesman within biker culture. When Barger died from liver cancer in 2022 at the age of 83, the extensive mainstream media coverage reflected his success in transcending the typical fate of outlaw figures. Rather than dying violently or disappearing into obscurity, he had managed the nearly impossible feat of remaining relevant and influential for over 6 decades, adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining the core identity that had first distinguished him in 1950s Oakland. Like Walter the Nugget Stadnick, Barger's influence extended far beyond his local chapter to shape the entire organization's direction and identity. Both men understood that the Hells Angels' survival depended on adapting to changing times while maintaining the core values and mystique that made the club legendary in outlaw culture. Number 5. Walter the Nugget Stadnick. Walter the Nugget Stadnick emerged as one of the most influential figures in the Canadian Hells Angels during a period of unprecedented expansion in the 1980s and 1990s. Born in Hamilton, Ontario, Stadnick's unassuming physical presence, he stood just 5 feet 5 inches tall, belied his extraordinary impact on outlaw biker culture across Canada. Unlike many high-profile Hells Angels who cultivated a flamboyant image, Stadnick operated with remarkable discretion. His nickname, the Nugget, derived from nugget due to his small stature, became ironic given his massive influence within the organization. What Stadnik lacked in physical intimidation, he more than compensated for with strategic brilliance and diplomatic skill. Stadnik's greatest accomplishment came in the late 1980s when he orchestrated the expansion of the Hells Angels throughout Canada. As national president of the Canadian Hells Angels from 1988 onward, he methodically approached regional biker gangs, convincing them to patch over to become Hells Angels chapters. This expansion strategy transformed the club from a regional curiosity into Canada's dominant outlaw motorcycle organization. His rise to power began far from the glamorous criminal underworld typically associated with outlaw bikers. Growing up in a working-class family in Hamilton, Stadnik developed an early fascination with motorcycle culture that provided escape from the industrial monotony surrounding him. While still a teenager, he joined local motorcycle clubs, quickly distinguishing himself through both riding skill and natural leadership qualities that belied his diminutive stature. Stadnik's entry into serious outlaw biker culture came through the Hamilton-based North End Gang, which evolved into the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club, at the time one of Canada's most powerful outlaw biker organizations. Despite his youth and physical size, Stadnik rose rapidly through the ranks, demonstrating exceptional strategic thinking and conflict resolution skills. Former associates noted his ability to see multiple steps ahead, anticipating both threats and opportunities long before they became apparent to others. His partnership with Maurice Mom Boucher proved particularly consequential for the Canadian criminal landscape. In 1988, Stadnik appointed Boucher as his Quebec lieutenant, creating an alliance that combined Stadnik's strategic vision with Boucher's charismatic leadership and willingness to employ extreme violence. Together, they transformed the Canadian Hells Angels from a collection of somewhat disorganized chapters into a highly coordinated criminal enterprise with unprecedented national reach. Unlike Boucher, whose flamboyant style and public profile generated media headlines, Stadnik preferred operating in the shadows. He rarely gave interviews, avoided unnecessary public appearances, and maintained a deliberately modest lifestyle that attracted minimal attention from law enforcement. This low-key approach reflected his understanding that sustainability required discretion, a lesson many of his more flamboyant contemporaries learned too late as their high profiles attracted targeted investigations. What made Stadnik particularly dangerous was his business acumen. He recognized that the club's long-term survival required moving beyond traditional biker crime into more sophisticated and lucrative criminal enterprises. Under his guidance, the Canadian Hells Angels diversified into financial crimes, legitimate business fronts, and complex money laundering operations that generated millions while minimizing exposure to prosecution. Stadnik's leadership faced its greatest test during the Quebec Biker War of the 1990s, when the Hells Angels engaged in a bloody conflict with the rival Rock Machine Club over control of drug trafficking territories. While Boucher garnered headlines for his flamboyant violence in Montreal, Stadnik operated behind the scenes, coordinating national strategy and ensuring that chapters across Canada provided necessary support to their Quebec brothers. In 2004, Stadnik's carefully constructed empire began to crumble when he was convicted on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, gangsterism, and drug trafficking. Sentenced to 14 years in prison, his incarceration marked the end of an era for the Canadian Hells Angels. Though the organizational structure he created continued to function effectively in his absence, Stadnik's legacy as a strategic visionary would find a powerful counterpoint in George Christie, who approached Hells Angels leadership with a dramatically different philosophy focused on public perception rather than covert expansion. Number 4. George Christie.
The wheels start turning and he starts thinking, this guy's a Hells Angel, but I think I can take him. And as the drinks go down, he gets a little bit braver and his muscles get a little bit more bigger. And then it reaches a point when you have to educate him and put everything back in perspective for him.
George Christie embodied a new archetype within the Hells Angels hierarchy, an articulate, media-savvy leader who helped transform the club's public image while expanding its influence throughout Southern California. As the longtime president of the Ventura chapter, Christie combined old-school biker loyalty with a sophisticated understanding of politics, public relations, and legitimate business that few of his contemporaries could match. Born in 1947 to Greek immigrant parents, Christie's path to the Hells Angels began after serving in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves. His early years gave little indication of the outlaw biker leader he would become. Raised in a relatively stable working-class family, Christie demonstrated both intellectual capacity and entrepreneurial instincts from an early age. Former classmates recalled a charismatic young man who displayed natural leadership qualities without the violent tendencies that characterized many future Hells Angels. Christie's entry into motorcycle culture came through legitimate channels rather than criminal associations. His exceptional mechanical skills and genuine passion for riding earned him respect in Southern California's motorcycle community during the late 1960s and early 1970s. This period coincided with the Hells Angels' transition from countercultural curiosity to established criminal organization, a transition Christie would significantly influence through his unique approach to leadership. He founded the Ventura chapter in the late 1970s, building it into one of the most stable and financially successful branches in the organization. Unlike many chapter presidents who ruled through intimidation, Christie cultivated a reputation for thoughtful leadership and strategic vision. Chapter members described a leader who prioritized long-term stability over short-term profit, carefully evaluating potential criminal ventures for their risk-reward ratio, rather than impulsively pursuing immediate gains. What truly distinguished Christie was his understanding of public perception. While many Hells Angels avoided media attention, Christie actively engaged with journalists, filmmakers, and community leaders, presenting himself as the reasonable face of an organization widely feared by the public. This approach proved remarkably effective in neutralizing negative publicity and fostering relationships with local authorities who might otherwise have targeted the club. Christie's public relations strategy extended beyond mere rhetoric to substantive community engagement. Under his leadership, the Ventura chapter organized charity events, toy drives for underprivileged children, and motorcycle safety programs that generated positive media coverage while establishing connections with legitimate business and political figures. These activities created a valuable buffer of public goodwill that complicated law enforcement efforts to target the chapter. His diplomatic skills proved particularly valuable during periods of tension with rival motorcycle clubs. Where other leaders might have immediately resorted to violence, Christie often sought negotiated solutions that minimized bloodshed while protecting the Angels' interests. This pragmatic approach earned him respect even from the club's enemies, who recognized him as a man whose word could be trusted. Christie's 35-year tenure with the Hells Angels ended controversially in 2011 when he resigned and returned his patches, a virtually unprecedented act within the club's culture of lifetime loyalty. His departure sparked rumors of internal conflicts, particularly with Sonny Barger, whose more traditional approach to club leadership often clashed with Christie's modernizing vision. After leaving the Hells Angels, Christie capitalized on his unique insider perspective by writing memoirs, giving lectures, and consulting on television productions about outlaw biker culture. His 2016 book, Exile on Front Street: My Life as a Hells Angel and Beyond, provided unprecedented insights into the organization's internal dynamics, leadership conflicts, and criminal operations. Revelations that earned him the enmity of former brothers who considered him a traitor to their code of silence. While Christie's media-savvy leadership style revolutionized the Hells Angels' public image in California, across the country on the East Coast, Charles "Doc" Pasciuti was simultaneously transforming the club through a different approach focused on organizational efficiency and criminal methodology. Number 3. Charles "Doc" Pasciuti. Charles "Doc" Pasciuti emerged as one of the most influential East Coast Hells Angels during the club's critical expansion period of the 1980s. As president of the Lowell, Massachusetts chapter, the first Hells Angels chapter established on the East Coast in 1966, Pasciuti guided the club through a period of unprecedented growth and sophistication that transformed their operations from disorganized criminal activities to structured enterprise. Unlike the stereotypical biker dropout, Pasciuti possessed considerable intelligence and education, hence the nickname Doc, which he applied to modernizing the club's operations. His background deviated significantly from the typical Hells Angels recruitment pattern. Growing up in a middle-class New England family with strong academic expectations, Pasciuti initially followed a conventional path, completing some college education before his fascination with motorcycle culture and outlaw lifestyle drew him into the biker world. Under his leadership, the Lowell chapter evolved from traditional biker crime, like theft and assault, into more lucrative ventures, particularly methamphetamine distribution throughout New England. Pasciuti recognized the significant profit potential in controlling regional drug markets, but understood that successful narcotics distribution required logistical precision, quality control, and territorial management beyond the capabilities of disorganized bikers operating independently. What distinguished Pasciuti from his predecessors was his organizational vision. He implemented a corporate-style structure within the chapter, with clear chains of command, specialized roles, and systematic profit sharing that increased both loyalty and efficiency. This approach transformed a loose collection of outlaws into a disciplined criminal organization that maximized profits while minimizing legal exposure. Pasciuti's sophistication extended to his security measures. Recognizing increasing law enforcement attention, he implemented counter-surveillance procedures, used coded communication, and compartmentalized information to frustrate investigators. He personally vetted every prospective member, ensuring they possessed the discipline and discretion necessary for the club's evolving operations. Perhaps Pasciuti's most significant innovation was his approach to financial management. Recognizing that visible wealth attracted both tax authorities and criminal investigations, he established elaborate money laundering operations through seemingly legitimate businesses owned by chapter members and associates. These businesses, including motorcycle repair shops, bars, and construction companies, provided both laundering mechanisms for drug profits and legitimate income that members could report to tax authorities. Despite his precautions, Pasciuti's reign ended in 1991 when he and 12 other members of the Lowell chapter were indicted on charges of conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. The operation had functioned across Massachusetts and New Hampshire for years, generating millions in profit before authorities managed to infiltrate the network through undercover agents and informants who gradually gained sufficient trust to access the operation's inner workings. In January 1993, Pasciuti pleaded guilty and received a 15-year prison sentence, the harshest among the defendants, reflecting his leadership role. Even from prison, he maintained influence over club operations through coded messages and loyal intermediaries, ensuring the systems he had established continued functioning in his absence. The sophisticated criminal infrastructure that Pasciuti established would later influence a new generation of Hells Angels leaders, including John Anthony Beale, who would further refine these organizational principles for the challenges of the early 21st century. Number 2. John Anthony Beale. John Anthony Beale rose to prominence as the president of the North Beach Hells Angels chapter during the early 2000s, establishing himself as a new breed of outlaw biker leader who combined traditional Hells Angels loyalty with business acumen rarely seen in previous generations. His leadership style reflected the club's evolution from chaotic rebels to sophisticated criminal entrepreneurs, operating in an increasingly complex legal landscape. Unlike many Hells Angels who entered the club directly from street-level crime, Beale brought considerable legitimate business experience to his role. Before his full immersion in outlaw biker culture, he had operated several successful construction companies, experience that proved invaluable in establishing legitimate fronts for the chapter's less legal activities. This background gave him insights into financial management and organizational structure that most of his predecessors lacked. What distinguished Beale from traditional Hells Angels leadership was his approach to risk management. Rather than embracing the flashy, high-profile lifestyle that had drawn law enforcement attention to previous leaders, Beale maintained a relatively low public profile. He drove modest vehicles, lived in an unassuming home, and avoided the ostentatious displays of wealth that had proven fatal to many of his predecessors. Beale's strategic vision extended to diversifying the chapter's revenue streams beyond traditional Hells Angels activities. While maintaining the drug distribution networks that had long been the club's financial backbone, he expanded into more sophisticated ventures, including credit card fraud, identity theft, and strategic investments in legitimate businesses that provided both income and laundering opportunities. This diversification strategy reflected Beale's understanding that sustainability required adaptability. As law enforcement agencies developed increasingly sophisticated techniques for targeting traditional biker crimes, Beale recognized the need to develop criminal enterprises that were both more profitable and less vulnerable to conventional investigative approaches. By maintaining a portfolio of criminal activities rather than relying on a single revenue stream, he ensured that the chapter could withstand disruption to any particular operation. What made Beale particularly effective was his understanding of compartmentalization. He structured the chapter's operations so that knowledge was strictly limited based on necessity. Members involved in drug distribution knew nothing about identity theft operations, while those handling money laundering through legitimate businesses remained separate from those conducting more violent enforcement activities. This approach minimized the damage potential informants or undercover officers could cause, as no single member possessed comprehensive knowledge of the chapter's full operations. Despite his caution, Beale's operation collapsed in July 2003 when he was indicted on federal drug and firearm charges following an extensive ATF investigation. Undercover agents had infiltrated allied motorcycle clubs, gathering evidence about cocaine transactions conducted at the Hells Angels clubhouse. The subsequent raids uncovered multiple firearms, ammunition, a bulletproof vest, and methamphetamine. The operation that brought down Beale was part of a coordinated nationwide investigation targeting the Hells Angels, resulting in simultaneous actions across multiple East Coast states. This comprehensive approach reflected law enforcement's evolution from targeting individual criminals to dismantling entire organizational structures, a strategy that proved particularly effective against the increasingly sophisticated club operations that leaders like Beale had established. Beale's legacy within Hells Angels history represents both the organization's evolution and its limitations. While his business acumen and risk management strategies demonstrated how outlaw motorcycle clubs could adapt to changing law enforcement techniques, his ultimate failure highlighted the inherent vulnerability of criminal organizations to prolonged, coordinated investigation. Even the most sophisticated criminal security measures proved insufficient against the resources of federal agencies determined to dismantle the Hells Angels operations. Despite Beale's sophisticated approach to criminal enterprise management, the Hells Angels' reputation for extreme violence persisted largely due to figures operating on the organization's periphery. Number 1. David Chalou.
Jury in Hamden Superior Court found David Chalou guilty on Friday of 3 counts of murder, kidnapping, and intimidation of a witness. The jury ruled that Chalou kidnapped and then killed David Glasser, Edward Frampton, and Robert Chadwell to prevent them from testifying against Adam Lee Hall, a ranking member of the Hells Angels. Hall was found guilty of...
David Chalou represents one of the most disturbing manifestations of Hells Angels adjacent criminality, a figure whose actions shocked even those familiar with outlaw biker violence. Though not a patched member of the Hells Angels, Chalou's close association with Sergeant-at-Arms Adam Lee Hall and participation in one of the most notorious Hells Angels-linked crimes in recent decades earned him a place in outlaw motorcycle club infamy. Born in 1967 in the industrial suburbs of Boston, Chalou's early life foreshadowed his eventual path into extreme violence. Former classmates described a youth marked by erratic behavior, explosive anger, and an unsettling fascination with inflicting pain on others. By his mid-teens, he had accumulated a juvenile record for assault, weapons possession, and animal cruelty, warning signs that would later mature into a disturbing capacity for human violence. Chalou's first significant encounters with the criminal justice system came during his early 20s, resulting in a prison sentence for armed robbery, where he formed his critical connection with the Aryan Brotherhood. Prison transformed Chalou from a disorganized street criminal into a disciplined, ideologically motivated enforcer. Fellow inmates noted his methodical approach to violence, clinical rather than emotional, and his apparent immunity to the psychological toll that inflicting extreme harm typically produces in most individuals. His imposing physical presence, standing 6 feet 5 inches and heavily muscled, made him an intimidating enforcer, while his prison background provided him with connections across multiple criminal organizations. Prison psychologists who interviewed Chalou during this period documented troubling indications of antisocial personality disorder with sadistic tendencies, noting his pronounced lack of empathy combined with an unusual degree of calculated control during violent episodes. What distinguished Chalou was his apparent lack of moral boundaries. Where even many hardened criminals followed certain codes limiting violence against innocent civilians, Chalou displayed a willingness to target anyone without hesitation or remorse. This reputation made him valuable to Hell's Angels members, requiring particularly brutal enforcement, even as the club maintained official distance to preserve deniability. Upon his release from prison in 2009, Chalou quickly established connections within the Western Massachusetts criminal underworld, offering his services as an enforcer and debt collector to various organizations. His reputation for extreme methods ensured compliance from targets who understood that refusing Chalou's demands would result in consequences beyond conventional criminal violence. His relationship with Adam Lee Hall, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Berkshire County Hells Angels chapter, proved particularly consequential. Their connection reportedly began when Hall witnessed Chalou's methods during a debt collection at a Pittsfield bar, where Chalou's calculated intimidation extracted payment from a debtor who had resisted previous efforts. Impressed by Chalou's combination of psychological manipulation and controlled violence, Hall began employing him for increasingly sensitive operations. When Hall determined that David Glasser needed to be eliminated to prevent him from testifying in an upcoming trial, Chalou was recruited for the operation. The subsequent triple murder, eliminating not just Glasser, but also his roommate Edward Frampton and their friend Robert Chadwell as potential witnesses, demonstrated Chalou's complete disregard for human life. The brutality of the crime shocked even veteran investigators. According to court documents, the victims were kidnapped from Frampton and Glasser's apartment in the early hours of August 28, 2011, during the aftermath of Tropical Storm Irene. They were taken to an isolated location where they were tortured before being killed. The bodies were then dismembered with power tools before being buried in a trench on private property in Beckett, Massachusetts. During the subsequent trial, evidence suggested that Chalou had taken particular pleasure in the killings, exhibiting behavior that prosecutors described as demonstrating a level of sadism beyond even what was necessary to accomplish the murders. Witness testimony indicated that Chalou had extended the suffering of at least one victim, despite Hall's instructions for a quick execution, suggesting that his motivation extended beyond mere criminal necessity to personal gratification. This extreme violence represented a significant departure from traditional Hells Angels operations, which typically limited extreme measures to direct threats from rival gangs or informants directly involved in club business. By targeting not only Glasser, but also two witnesses whose only crime was being present at the wrong time, Chalou and Hall crossed a line that shocked even hardened criminals within the outlaw biker community. Investigative journalist Michael Johnson, who covered the case extensively, noted, "There was genuine revulsion among some Hells Angels when details of the murders emerged. The club has its own twisted code, but killing disabled witnesses who posed no direct threat violated even their distorted ethics." Several members privately expressed concerns that such extreme violence would bring the kind of heat that could destroy chapters across the Northeast. The investigation that followed revealed the limitations of even the most careful criminal planning. Despite Hall and Chalou's efforts to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence, investigators quickly identified them as suspects based on their history with Glasser and previous threats against him. The discovery of the victims' remains in a shallow grave on private property, combined with electronic evidence and testimony from associates who had knowledge of the crime, provided prosecutors with overwhelming evidence for conviction. In 2014, following a trial that captivated and horrified Western Massachusetts, Chalou was convicted of 3 counts of murder, 3 of kidnapping, and 3 of intimidation of a witness. The judge imposed 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. ensuring Chalou would never return to society. During sentencing, the judge noted that the murders demonstrated a depravity that defies comprehension, particularly given that 2 of the victims had developmental disabilities and posed no threat beyond their potential witness status. Chalou's case illustrates the complex ecosystem surrounding outlaw motorcycle clubs, where official members often work with non-patched associates to maintain separation between the club and particularly egregious crimes. This arrangement allows the organization to preserve deniability, while still benefiting from the services of individuals willing to commit acts that might otherwise bring unwanted attention. The fallout from Chalou's crimes extended beyond his own imprisonment. The Berkshire County chapter of the Hells Angels never recovered from the scandal and intense law enforcement scrutiny that followed. Membership declined dramatically as potential recruits avoided association with the chapter, while existing members transferred to other regions or abandoned the club entirely. By 2017, the chapter had effectively ceased operations. Its clubhouse in Lee eventually sold to cover legal expenses and civil judgments resulting from the murders. While figures like Maurice Mom Boucher fundamentally shaped the Hells Angels through organizational leadership and strategic vision, Chalou represents the violent fringe that has maintained the club's fearsome reputation. Both aspects have contributed to the Hells Angels' enduring status as the world's most notorious outlaw motorcycle club, an organization whose influence on criminal subculture and popular imagination continues to reverberate decades after its formation.